Hare Krishna, everyone. All glories to Aindra Prabhu, all glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura, and all the previous acharyas, back to Lord Brahma and Lord Shri Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Now let us begin. So today's topic is going to be covering the true glories of Aindra Prabhu, who he actually is, what he actually did, and what he actually taught. Specifically about the true glories of Shri Radha and the actual meaning of Harinama Sankirtana, what is actually taking place during Harinama Sankirtana, and why this is absolutely essential for our devotional advancement and happiness in life on both the material and transcendental levels. Alright, so Aindra Prabhu, as most of you know, left his body in 2010, in the year 2010, in about the month of June, I believe it was. If I'm not mistaken, it was June 10th, 2010, or thereabouts. What happened was, it's not 100% certain exactly if he was actually murdered, or if he chose to leave his body in that way, or that Radha and Krishna themselves arranged that. It's not 100% for certain exactly what took place. What is known was that he left his body bowing to his deities in full obeisances. And what is known is that he taught pure devotional service and engaged in pure devotional service. So these things are known. So therefore, whatever the exact case was, we know that currently he is back with Radha and Krishna in Goloka Vrindavana, and or continuing to engage in spreading the movement of Lord Chaitanya somewhere in a material universe. So, or both. So therefore, it's very important to daily pay our respects and our obeisances to him, and honor him for what he has done for us, and for inspiring us all in daily Harinama Sankirtana. Because it very much so, it's to do with what he taught and elaborated on in very great detail about the glories of Radha and Krishna and Lord Chaitanya in his books, in his preaching, and in his kirtanas themselves. Okay? So, Aindra Prabhu was very interesting in the fact that he actually made it very he made a very specific point to actually really strongly emphasize the glories of Radharani, okay, in terms of making it very clear that the only way to actually make it back to Goloka Vrindavana is to specifically have Shri Radha as the center of one's focus, okay, no matter which one of the five rasas one is in. So in other words, the basic prerequisite for dwelling in Goloka Vrindavana specifically is to have the bare minimum requirement is to see Radha and Krishna as co-equal, if one is not able to recognize how and in what way she is superior and actually controls Krishna behind the scenes. If one cannot see this fully or clearly, at the very least one has to recognize that Radha and Krishna are co-equal together as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Radha and Krishna together, okay? So Krishna being the upfront Supreme, and Shri Radha being the hidden, behind the scenes Supreme. Okay? Together, as Lord Chaitanya, as one form, they are Supreme as well. So as Radha Krishna and as Lord Chaitanya simultaneously. Okay? So now, let's go into what Aindra Prabhu actually taught about Shri Radha, about her glories, and about what Harinama Sankirtana actually is. We've covered this in previous videos up to this point already. So I'm just going to go over that again and somewhat elaborate more on Aindra Prabhu's emphasis, why he emphasized what he did so much, and exactly what he was teaching and preaching, which is very important for us to pay attention to and understand. Okay? So the first thing we need to understand about Kaliyuga is that there's no living entity in Kaliyuga that is qualified to engage in any other process aside from Harinama Sankirtana. Now this is due to multiple reasons. This is not only due to the fact that it's Kaliyuga, this is also due to the fact that Harinama Sankirtana specifically is our eternal function in Goloka, in our relationship with Radha and Krishna. Okay? So, and Kaliyuga happens to be the most perverse, most direct and blatant distortion of that deepest relationship. Welcome, Nitai Gaur. Good to have you. So understanding this is first and foremost about Harinama Sankirtana, that it's not just the process to go back to Godhead, it's actually literally what we're doing in Goloka, eternally, okay? Now, the Harinama Sankirtana in Goloka, that is the Eightfold Daily Pastimes between Radha and Krishna, and us with them, with Radha and Krishna. It's also known as the Ashtakaliya Lilas, which are talked about in the Rasa Shastras, and also the names that Radha and Krishna are called by. So Hare, we specifically say Hare instead of Radha or Radhe in the Mahamantra, because Radharani is specifically in this hidden form, this form which is alluring Krishna and alluring the living entities to both Radha and Krishna. Okay? That is why we specifically say Hare instead of Radhe or Radha. So we say Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And this Mahamantra has to do with so many things. It has to do with Radharani's 8 various moods towards Sri Krishna. It has to do with the Eightfold Daily Pastimes, the 8 Ashtasakis, and the 8 time periods of the day. So many things like this. Because in Goloka there's this eternal daily cycle that takes place, which is basically the same cycle every day, but filled with infinite variety within that cycle. Okay? Which is why, as we explained before, the number pi is what it is in the material world, because these mathematical numbers, these transcendental numbers, are coming from Goloka Vrindavana, and are causing the manifestation of the distortion of Goloka in the material world also. Okay? So, understanding that Harinama Sankirtana is our eternal function in Goloka, this is one thing that Aindra Prabhu really strongly emphasized. Lord Chaitanya confirms this, Prabhupada confirms this also, all throughout his purports and books, especially in his descriptions of the gopis and their mood. So Harinama Sankirtana engagement in the form of chanting the holy names and book distribution to facilitate the chanting of these holy names congregationally together. Both of these activities are the mood of the gopis and the manjaris, and also the mood of all living entities of the other 4 rasas, I should say, in Goloka. Okay? So, Aindra Prabhu was very, very heavily preaching this and strongly emphasizing this point to all devotees, making it very clear that if we're not engaging in our original function daily that we have eternally in Goloka, then we're not actually engaging in devotional service in the first place. Okay? We're basically just engaging in subsidiary processes of devotional service, and whatever devotional service we are engaging in, it's basically just at a very minuscule level if we're not actually engaging in Kirtana. Okay? Harinama Sankirtana specifically. Alright? So, in the process of teaching this, he also set the example. He actually daily engaged in this Harinama Sankirtana, and he was really also very much in depth in terms of chanting Japamala as the subsidiary and correlating factor with his Harinama Sankirtana. Okay? He made it very clear, and it's very easy to understand, that Harinama Sankirtana is our giving of love to other living entities, uniting Radha and Krishna with them, and Japamala is us meditating on our intimate relationships with Radha and Krishna individually, both. Okay? So, both together are a complete whole, and Kirtana, even by itself, is also completely whole and complete. And this is why, and Aindra Prabhu also very much emphasized the teachings of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakura in terms of the importance of genuinely practicing this, okay? And he also spoke out against the Radhakunda Babaji nonsense that was going on, because the fact of the matter is, unless one is already a pure devotee, now if anyone doesn't know what Babaji is, okay, there's basically 2 forms of renunciation one can take. Usually towards the end of life, sometimes a person can take it sooner, but both of these forms of renunciation are, first of all, sannyasa is forbidden in Kaliyuga, and Babaji is along those lines as well. Basically, Babaji is sort of another version of sannyasa. Basically, the only real difference is sannyasa, you're going around traveling and preaching, and not having any intimate contact with sex, with females or whatever, or if you're homosexual, you're not having any intimate contact with the males either, if you're a sannyasi. And if one is Babaji, yes, it is forbidden in Kali Yuga, except unless one's already a pure devotee. So if one is already a pure devotee, and they're able to do this, then they can take sannyasa or Babaji, okay? But Babaji is especially not recommended, and Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura especially strongly spoke out against this Babaji stuff, because Babaji mostly consists of, well, first of all, this needs to be understood, because Kaliyuga, the lust is so thick, and it permeates everything that we think, do, say, every daily engagement. If one goes to take Babaji and dwell in Radhakunda, basically, Babaji, you're sitting in one place or a localized area, more or less, and just internally focusing on your meditation, on your eternal relationship with Radha and Krishna, and focusing on chanting the Mahamantra all day in terms of Japamala. Okay, that's what Babaji is. That's what Babajis do, basically. And then sannyasis naturally are going and preaching, spreading the holy names everywhere, walking around, traveling. So, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura and Prabhupada, they both didn't recommend sannyasa unless one was actually qualified for it, but they especially didn't recommend Babaji. Because at least with sannyasa, even if one is fallen down or makes mistakes, at least they're actually engaging in the process, which is closer to Harinama Sankirtana, or directly engaged in that, in the sense of actually going out and spreading the glories of Radha and Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. Okay? So even if one falls down as a sannyasi or doesn't actually meet the standards, they're still better off than if they're falling down as a Babaji, basically. Because at least they're actually preaching and going out and broadcasting the holy names, even if they themselves are falling down. Okay? So, but in the case of Babaji, they're not really broadly preaching anywhere or anything like that. They're just staying in one place, and they're chanting Japamala. So if one isn't a pure devotee and they do this, or they try to do this, they will be thinking about sex with women if they're straight, and if they're homosexual, they'll be thinking about sex with men. Bisexuals, they'll be thinking about sex with men and women. The point is, if you go to a solitary place in this age of Kaliyuga and chant Japamala, you will be thinking of sex. That's what you're going to be thinking about. You're not going to be thinking about pure devotional service or things like this. No, unless you're already a pure devotee. Okay, so in the cases of those who were already pure devotees, they took sannyasa. So Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura accepted this, so did Prabhupada, and they were able to properly complete these regulations and stuff like this. Okay. And they were engaged 24/7 in Harinama Sankirtana in the form of translating and publishing books which spread the glories of the holy names and which provide the histories and everything else to convince people to engage in the Yuga Dharma. Okay? So if one spends their whole day translating books which are encouraging people to do this, correctly translating and actually spreading the real message of Radha and Krishna with their own personal insights in the process, that is also Harinama Sankirtana, because you're combining the absolute truth, fact, with Radha and Krishna with your own personal, infinitely unique insights into that eternal dynamic from the perspective of you being the individual, unique living being you are. Okay? So, Aindra Prabhu, in the process of actually doing Harinama Sankirtana, he also heavily spoke against the institutionalization of things. Okay? So he spoke against the false sannyasa that was taking place. He spoke against people accepting disciples also, unless and until they were actually themselves qualified by engaging continually in the Yuga Dharma and understanding the principles of pure devotional service first. And even then, it's not recommended to accept disciples, because first and foremost, we have to become fully qualified disciples first, before we can even fathom accepting formalized disciples or anything like that. Because otherwise, what's going to happen, and what he called out, was that these individuals are simply taking on sins of others, and they're just accruing on themselves for no reason at all, unnecessary, more sinful reactions. So Aindra Prabhu termed this, it's a perfect terminology for this. It's called trying to save others and getting drowned oneself in the process. Okay? A very foolish act. Basically, it's a form of like utopian idealism, where basically, okay, my intent is to try and save others even though I'm not saved myself. But what ends up just happening is you just end up accruing sins on yourself, when what you could have done was just focus on purifying yourself by being dependent on Radha and Krishna and allowing them to do the same thing, right? But when you become a formalized acharya, now you're taking on sins and neutralizing sins. So if you're not a pure devotee, in the case of a pure devotee, Radha and Krishna themselves neutralize the sins for you on your behalf. Whereas if you're not a pure devotee, basically it's on you. You're taking the karma yourself of others. So this is why we shouldn't let others touch our feet, even if they try to, because when people touch the feet with the intent of paying obeisances or something like that, they're actually transferring their sinful reactions onto you, if they have any. Okay, very important to understand this. So, so in the process of Aindra Prabhu speaking out against this, he spoke that if one, and this is very true also, because what we're seeing nowadays is we're seeing a lot of sidelining of Shri Radha Okay, and this is what Aindra Prabhu noticed, and I also had noticed this a lot, and I'm glad he brought this up, because he's confirming what Prabhupada speaks in the books and what all the previous acharyas speak about this. So what I mean by this is, in other words, there's all this talk about Krishna, right? But Radharani, whenever she's discussed or mentioned, she's only referred to as like the internal potency of Krishna, or basically like always just to the side of him, basically accompanying him and assisting him. But she's never actually preached, or she hadn't been preached according to who she actually is, until since Prabhupada left the planet, basically, and since Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur had left, people weren't preaching correctly about Shri Radha anymore. They were, because the fact of the matter is, Shri Radha is at the forefront of everything. She is actually factually the supreme. Okay, so Radha and Krishna together are the supreme. Krishna's actual intentions, his actual feelings, his actual heart towards us is Shri Radha. The nature that is Shri Radha Rani's nature. Okay. This is very important to understand too, because a lot of devotees just assume or think that they can just focus on Krishna, right? And then by doing that, their whole life, following the 4 regs, chanting 16 rounds, focusing on Krishna as the center of focus, and just putting Radharani to the side, that they'll be able to make it to Vrindavana. No, it doesn't work that way. You can make it maybe to Dvaraka or Mathura if you do that, maybe, and that's why Dvaraka and Mathura are branch-off places. They're places for those who do not fully appreciate Shri Radha. That's what those places are for, actually. No, they do have appreciation for Shri Radha, but not the full depth of appreciation that the inhabitants of Vrindavana have for her, okay? This is very significant, and I've covered this many times in the past, and Aindra Prabhu himself covered this a lot in his lectures and stuff like this. So, Vraja, Vrindavana, the place that the acharyas want us to get to, okay, as our main residence and abode eternally, is the place where Shri Radha is the center of focus, okay? That's Vrindavana. It's not where just Krishna by himself is the center of focus and Radharani is just around him, surrounding him, or next to him. No. Radharani herself is the center of focus in Vrindavana, and Krishna goes along with what she wants to have happen, okay? That is Vrindavana. And a devotee must understand this to make it there. If a devotee does not grasp this, and they cannot understand this by the time they leave their body, they will at best make it to Mathura or Dvaraka, but they will not make it to Vrindavana. Okay? And we see in the scriptures many instances of this fact, where Akrura and Kritavarma, these individuals who were involved in, basically, what it came down to begin with, they didn't actually properly appreciate Shri Radha, and that was at the essence of it. So they ended up getting involved in killing Radharani's father in Dvaraka Lila, because Radharani is also Satyabhama. She's the exact same individual, okay, who transfers and goes over to Dvaraka Lila as well. And then Rukmini is Chandravali, okay, from Vrindavana. So in Dvaraka Lila, Radharani's pastime father is Satrajit, okay, Satrajit. And he was slain, and Akrura, who is otherwise known as a devotee of Krishna, and Kritavarma, who were both otherwise known as pure devotees of Krishna, were involved in slaying him, okay, in this conspiracy. And yes, I'll answer this in just a second, Robin. Thank you for mentioning that. It's a good point. Okay, so basically, what happened was they got involved in such a horrendous act. Basically, they were behind and involved in plotting the murder of Radharani's father, okay, her pastime father in Dvaraka. Afterwards, Krishna forgave them and stuff, but Kritavarma had to go through a huge penance. He ended up surviving the Mahabharata, but he had to go through a major, severe penance for that, and so did Akrura also, okay? But this is the point of this story. It was especially to show us that when one is involved in sidelining Shri Radha, they're going to end up getting involved with a lot of bad people in the material world, like demons and all this other stuff, and they're going to end up getting involved in pastimes where they go through this unnecessary conspiratorial stuff involved in killing other devotees or harming other devotees and things like that. It leads to a whole monstrous mess of things when one sidelines Radharani and their consciousness. And this is actually what we've seen over the course of like the 80s, 90s up until today. There's been so much sidelining of Radharani in the preaching and in the perception of devotees internally towards her that we've seen this dynamic play out that actually played out with Akrura and Kritavarma when Krishna actually appeared. The same dynamic is played out today, where devotees are going against each other, they're killing each other, conspiracies here and there and stuff. It's all because they're sidelining Radharani. They're not actually appreciating her properly, and that's what leads to those types of things taking place. Okay, Aindra Prabhu called this out, and he called this out boldly everywhere he went. And this is correlated with people not appreciating Harinama Sankirtana and what is going on. Because devotees weren't understanding that Harinama Sankirtana is the mood of the Manjaris and Gopis, manifested in the material world and in Chaitanya Lila. Okay? So they're at the forefront of book distribution. Book distribution is literally the Manjaris and Gopis uniting other living entities intimately with Radha and Krishna. That's literally what's going on. Okay? And if a devotee doesn't understand this, if they think book distribution is just distributing the books, just informing them about Krishna, and then the only thing that has to do with the intimate relationship that person has with Krishna is their own chanting and their own direct contact, they've not understood. Book distribution itself is intimate, transcendental, pure loving interactions in Goloka. So literally, handing people books and spreading the holy names is literally you in Goloka Vrindavana, uniting them physically in intimate intercourse with Radha and Krishna. Literally, that's what's taking place when you're distributing books and when you're singing Harinama Sankirtana. That's actually what you're doing. Okay? This must be understood. So that's the case if one is in Parakya Rasa. If one is in one of the other 5 rasas, they're facilitating that happening in Parakya Rasa. Okay? When they're distributing books, so on and so forth. Yes, book distribution is also Harinama Sankirtana if the intent and focus in book distribution is to get people to engage in Harinama Sankirtana, understanding what Harinama Sankirtana is. Yes, in that case, book distribution is Harinama Sankirtana. The version that Bhaktisiddhanta wanted spread, that was the book distribution he was talking about. Okay, and that's the version of book distribution Prabhupada was talking about too. So book distribution isn't just spreading information about Krishna so that people have the information. It's about actually focusing on uniting them with Radha and Krishna intimately, internally, while you're doing this externally. All right? This has to be understood. Then book distribution becomes Harinama Sankirtana. Okay? Book distribution, if that is not the consciousness while doing so, book distribution remains, yes, an aspect of devotional service, but it remains a subsidiary factor if that isn't the consciousness when you're distributing books. Okay? It's a very important point to remember. That is why Aindra Prabhu called his book The Heart of Transcendental Book Distribution instead of The Heart of Harinama Sankirtana, because the heart of book distribution is Harinama Sankirtana. Okay? And I notice I keep repeating this every single video, but this is really the essence of what Aindra Prabhu kept teaching over and over and over and over again, and this must be spread and preached, because this is the truth of what Chaitanya preached also, and what Prabhupada preached, and what all the acharyas preached, actually. So I'll answer this question now you brought up, Robin, or this comment, I should say. I never knew it before, you says. I am surprised to learn from you that Radha Krishna take your sins so you can go back easier to Godhead if you're a pure devotee. It sounds so similar to Christianity, and that Jesus take your sins if you believe. What it is actually is that there's this intense affection Radha and Krishna feel, especially strongly towards the one who's purely engaging in their devotional service. Radha and Krishna feel this towards all of us, but the individuals who are tapped into their eternal relationship with Radha and Krishna, okay, and are actually doing that consciously, they're actually tapping into what Radha and Krishna are actually doing for all of us. But the ones who aren't engaged in pure devotion yet aren't tapping into that. So therefore, basically, they're just stuck in this cyclical thing of experiencing this distortion of their relationship with Radha and Krishna. Where the pure devotees, they're immersed in the original version relationship. Okay? So that Radha and Krishna, they don't allow their pure devotees to suffer. This is the point. So Radha and Krishna themselves will neutralize the sinful reactions and take that on behalf of their pure devotee. Okay? Whereas if somebody isn't a pure devotee, they're basically just taking on sins themselves. And yes, Radha and Krishna to a certain degree will help with that also, naturally. But the way it works is like you actually have to desire and be engaged in your original function. Right? Like if you actually desire to engage in sinful things, then you're also at the same time desiring to face the results of those sinful activities. Okay? In other words, you're desiring to experience what goes around comes around, because all living beings are immersed eternally in fairness. Okay? So we're eternally fair beings, and Radha and Krishna are eternally fair. So they won't allow us, and we won't allow ourselves to ever get a one-up on any other living entity and cause pain to others without ourselves going through that pain that they're suffering. We're required to develop this empathy to the full degree. And the only way that can happen is if a living being, if they're improperly behaving, if they actually experience what the others are experiencing to develop that empathy. Okay? So if one is not engaged in pure devotion, that's the key. And then so you said, so if you have pure devotion to Christ, you can go back to Godhead. Here's the thing, yes, if one has actual pure devotion to Christ, they will take to Krishna consciousness immediately once presented. That is correct. Absolutely. If one does not have actual faith in Christ, they will not take to Krishna consciousness once it's presented to them. For example, I was very much a sincere Christian, and I'm saying this on my own, but I very much know I was a sincere Christian. I had intense faith in Christ and still do to this day. And I've never considered myself not Christian, even to this day, actually. Because once I was presented with Krishna Consciousness, I was immediately convinced that that was actually the truth. That was actually what Christ was trying to get at, and that was actually what the Bible was trying to teach me the whole time, was Krishna Consciousness, the further message, okay? The Comforter, which is talked about in the Bible, the one who was to be sent after Christ, who would reveal the full message, was referring to Lord Chaitanya, his movement, and the pure devotees after him. That is who was being referred to, okay? A lot of Christians will think, oh, it's just referring to the Holy Spirit or some vague thing. No, it's referring to Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and it's referring to his pure devotees. That's who the Comforter is, yeah. It's very easy to understand this. So, but, you know, those Christians who are not fully sincere yet, they won't take to Krishna Consciousness immediately once presented. It'll still take them a while to gradually be convinced of it, you know. What's interesting is generalized Christianity as a whole, basically it really puts a trap on a lot of people's consciousness, because they get this like paranoia against all forms of deity worship, considering it idolatry and all these other things. Now, I initially was so attracted to deity worship, I actually thought that that might be the very thing. So I looked at it originally like this. Even though I accepted Krishna Consciousness as the truth, I could feel it was true. I initially thought, because I had been so conditioned by the Christian stuff, that, okay, I was thinking like this: if I'm going to be deceived by an Antichrist figure or an Antichrist ideology, this would be how I would be deceived, because I'm naturally inclined towards deity worship, towards obsessing on the forms of Radha and Krishna, towards intimate meditations. All this stuff was what I was already fixating on, even as a Christian, before I was confirmed that Krishna Consciousness is the truth. So I was like, well, if I were to be deceived, that's exactly how I would be deceived, you know? But then it occurred to me, this is what actually did occur to me, though, that the Antichrist stuff and all this other stuff, it is connected to Krishna Consciousness, but it's going to be the bogus syncretic Brahmavadi version of Krishna Consciousness that's spread and passed off as Krishna Consciousness, that is the one world religion and connected to this one world religion lockdown government stuff, okay? It's connected to our movement. So the marking on the forehead or in the right hand, that has to do with multiple things. It has to do with the chips also, but it also has to do with Japamala as well, okay? And it also has to do with the tilak mark too, on the forehead. So make no mistake about it. The Antichrist, the beast, all this other stuff, it's connected with our movement, but it's connected with the bogus, distorted version of our movement, though. Okay? That's what it's connected to. All right? So the Antichrist is going to very much arise among us also, within our movement as well. Many people are going to label me that individual and others like me that individual, but that's just going to be a label. Who the Antichrist really is actually a very much so has to do with the subconscious perception of our relationship with Radha and Krishna. That's really more so who the Antichrist is, rather than specifically being an externalized individual. So this Antichrist principle will manifest in various individuals. Yes, probably an AI, probably some other people, and then he's going to have his spokesman and all this other stuff. But yeah, so that's coming. So just be aware of this. So, because what's predicted in the Bible is playing out accurately, but the way most Christians see it, it's not exactly the way most Christians see it on the mainstream scene. Okay, it is taking place, but not exactly the way they're perceiving, I guess is what I'm trying to say here. Okay, and so Aindra Prabhu, his glories, it must be understood too, that Aindra Prabhu, he specifically revealed at the end of his book his meditations on his relationship with Radha and Krishna in terms of how he visualized his Svarupa and what he realized about his Svarupa. Now, this is how one comes to these realizations, by going through the process of daily Harinama Sankirtana and very intensive Japamala with internal meditations and practicing pure celibacy as well. You come to these realizations about your Svarupa naturally, okay? Because Harinama Sankirtana is one's original function. So at the end of the book, he revealed that his meditations up until that point of writing that book, regarding what he realized about himself, the details of his form that he had realized up to that point, which may be his eternal highest level of details of form, who knows? Or he may have refined it further after leaving his body. The point is, we can understand from what he revealed to us in this book that he revealed to us his Svarupa, in other words, his eternal preference with Radha and Krishna. Okay? And he did this to set the example, to show us how one goes about meditating on their eternal form when they're engaged in Harinama Sankirtana and Japamala, and the result of this leads to this type of realization. Okay? Like a very practical thing. So the people who are labeling Aindra Prabhu Sahaja or Sahaja tinged, they're very offensive people. Anybody who has any insight or understanding, or actually listens to what Aindra Prabhu has taught, listens to what he says, will understand that he's absolutely a very deep, pure devotee with not even the slightest tinge whatsoever of Sahaja, anything at all in his consciousness. The only people who say that are, number one, the people who haven't actually listened to everything he said, like all of his lectures. I've listened to every one of them that I could come across, and all of his kirtanas that I could come across too. So I can confirm 100%, 108%, beyond that, 1,008%, that he is who he says he is at the end of his book, and also what he's teaching about Radha and Krishna is correct. You can confirm this with the teachings of Lord Chaitanya and Prabhupada. So the pure devotees are continuing on. They're still appearing among us, but there's just the fact of the matter is, at any given point in history, the ones closest to the pure devotee are always usually the ones who recognize them the least, okay, as being a pure devotee, right? So Prabhupada had his family members, people surrounding him. They recognized he was a pure devotee, but they didn't really recognize the full depth of his purity of devotion. It was kind of just like, oh, he's a really super sincere devotee, and that's what they saw as being pure. And that's the exact same thing that's happened with Aindra Prabhu. Basically, the people around him, they were just, oh yes, he's a very deep, sincere devotee. But there's always like this hinders doubt, but was he 100% pure or wasn't he? It's like, yes, he was. It's very obvious to understand this. So the only people who accuse him of all these things are fools and rascals and idiots who have not actually paid attention to what he's teaching and actually not understood what he's teaching about Harinama Sankirtana. And also they don't understand the principles of understanding the Svarupa correctly either, basically. So, in other words, the people who make those claims are lazy individuals who are too lazy to engage in daily Harinama Sankirtana, and secondarily, they're too lazy to actually go in that direction to develop personal deep insight into their own Svarupas, okay? So they think that anybody else who does it is automatically Sahaja or a speculator because they themselves can't do it, basically. So they're just jealous and envious that they're not able to do so, okay? And that's really what it is. And the same people that use Prabhupada as a body bag for their sins and everything else, you know. So yeah, because it's self-evident, you know, anybody who has intelligence and can understand things clearly will see the purity of Aindra Prabhu. It's not rocket science. It's very easy to see. You know, it's very clear. And this is why he was wanted dead and ousted from the Krishna Balaram Mandir location where he was constantly engaging in kirtanas, because the other guys who were running the administration, they didn't like what he was preaching, the in-depth stuff he was preaching about Radha and Krishna, and the intimate leelas and pastimes and stuff. And they also didn't like the fact that he was calling them out at the same time for being corrupt and deceitful and everything like this, okay? And because he was disliked on those levels by the hierarchical minded people, they wanted to toss him, give him the boot, basically, you know, or get rid of him. And they want to get rid of anyone who does this too. This is the whole thing. This is why I don't mess around with trying to function inside ISKCON anymore. I'm not even going to waste time trying to, because ISKCON is Prabhupada's movement, irregardless of on paper who considers themselves part of it or not. The fact of the matter is Lord Chaitanya's movement eternally and Prabhupada's movement. And we don't recognize the authorities if they're not engaging in Harinama Sankirtana. So I don't consider them ISKCON at all. I also don't consider Ritvik's ISKCON either. It's basically, so if we need to go by a different name on paper, that's fine, because the movement is the same. It doesn't matter what the name is on paper. International Society for Krishna Consciousness, International Harinama Sankirtana movement. The point is, it's always the International Harinama Sankirtana movement. You know, because that's Lord Chaitanya's movement. You know, that was the case before, even before the Gaudiya Math was established, all the way back to Lord Brahma. It's been the same movement. Okay, so yeah, you can see his sincerity immediately when he talks. Exactly, it's common sense. Basically, anyone who has a softened heart and deep insight will see his purity in what he's saying. Even just a few sentences, just a few paragraphs, you'll see it and you'll feel it. It's very easy to understand. Okay, the only ones who don't see this are the ones who want to hide the fact that they're still engaging in illicit sex, masturbating, and they're hiding this behind closed doors, and or the individuals who want to basically just use Prabhupada as a Christ figure for them, basically to dump their sins on, while they don't actually have to fully purify themselves. Okay, so that they can focus, so that they can spend their time criticizing others and spend their time focusing on how others are not doing things correctly instead of actually purifying themselves. All right, and instead of engaging in Harinama Sankirtana. You'll see this common trend. The ones who engage in constant criticism aren't engaging in daily Harinama Sankirtana. They're not. And that's why they spend their time criticizing, because it's a sinful reaction for not engaging in daily Harinama Sankirtana. Now, calling out corruption is one thing, but if you spend all your time only calling out corruption to the point where you start calling out people who aren't corrupt at all, and just accusing everybody everywhere of corruption, no matter who they are, then that becomes a problem, because now you're not just calling out corruption, you're actually starting to accuse actual sincere people now in the midst of calling out the corruption, you see. And that's what causes people to take birth as asuras and all these other types of things that'll eventually have to be killed by Krishna and stuff. In other words, so they'll get Krishna's contact eventually, but it'll come in a really more intense, aggressive, harsh way to purify them of those sinful reactions of committing offenses to other devotees, right? So that's what happens. If someone spends their time criticizing other devotees and their focus is on like the negative throughout their whole life, but they stay devoted to Krishna and they stay devoted to some acharya, they take birth as an asura who gets killed by Krishna later. That's what happens, basically. So in other words, they get to live out all their negative, angry, envious, hatred, and all this other stuff. And then what happens in the next life is they also forget Krishna to a certain degree. And then they end up fixating on Krishna also in like a fearful, paranoid, like criticizing type mode as well later on. And by doing so, because they had previously engaged in devotion to Krishna to some sincere degree, they are then purified by Krishna that way, forcefully. So yeah, I mean, but it's just a long way around. It's basically like the roundabout, prolonged way to get purified by Krishna, and it's not good. And there's every potential that you won't be able to get killed by Krishna that way in your next life, but you'll actually have to just descend further and further into hellish species. It depends on the nature of one's offenses and to what degree. Like let's say someone's offensive in the sense that they're just verbally criticizing and miscalling out, like basically if they're erroneously calling somebody sahaja or this or that when they're actually not, and those people are just assuming that everybody's this or that, or a deviant or this, and pointing fingers at everybody, but they're not actually like aggressively hateful towards those people, but they just mistakenly think they're deviants or whatever. In that case, you can take birth as an asura and get killed by Krishna. However, if you actually have inimical feelings towards individuals who are also devotees and actually wish them ill, like wish to harm them physically or whatever, even if they are deviants, that type of consciousness will lead you further down into actual hellish suffering. Okay? So it's the nature of the criticism, and how do you feel towards them in the process, right? Do you actually have love in your heart towards them in the midst of criticism, even though criticism is still wrong, or do you actually have hatred towards them, okay? Which is mode of ignorance, not devotional at all, okay? And that's why Krishna says, devotion in the mode of ignorance involves the desire to harm others. That's devotion to me in the mode of ignorance. Because sincere devotees don't desire to harm others, especially they don't desire to cause ill, and they don't find pleasure in devotees suffering. But those devotees engaged to devotion to Krishna in the mode of ignorance, they find the subconscious pleasure in devotees getting what they deserve type thing if they're deviants, or like suffering for not doing devotion correctly. The ones who are engaged in devotion to Krishna in the mode of ignorance find some subconscious pleasure in other devotees suffering when they deviate or when they make mistakes. Okay? Devotees in the mode of passion and goodness don't find pleasure in those things at all. We don't want other devotees to suffer even when they deviate, or even when they are sahajas or misleading people. No, we still want them to be not hurt, not harmed, and we just want them to come correctly to the correct understanding. We don't actually wish them ill, though, and we don't find any pleasure in them suffering or anything like that, and we immediately forgive them also, instantly, without any considerations. The second they agree to come to the correct understanding or principle, immediately, we just forget the past and move forward. That's the whole thing. So the thing is, every moment we need to be moving forward and brushing aside the past, focusing on real-time Harinam Sankirtana and loving devotees. Okay? And then Gabriel Yosef Bushan, and thanks for joining us. You said, I'm just coming in. Can anyone comment on Robin's comment, Sannyasa forbidden Kaliyuga? What exactly is meant by that? So, yeah, I covered it a little bit earlier in the video, so I encourage you to watch the earlier parts. But sannyasa being forbidden in Kaliyuga has to do with all sannyas, no matter what era in this endless continuum, always advances. That is correct, but actual sannyasa. So here's the thing. What sannyasa means, and what you're doing as a sannyasi, is you're never ejaculating, you're never masturbating, you're never having sexual thoughts towards women. And if you are doing those things, you're not classified as sannyasa anymore. Okay? One-time slip-ups are a different case from repeated fall-downs, which is twice or more within a certain time frame. Okay? So sannyasa, it's forbidden in Kali Yuga because, number one, there's so many regulations regarding actual physical behaviors and standards that one has to follow, which simply are practical. They're not even observable in Kali Yuga, externally speaking. Okay, so and then on top of that, there's the internal stuff that needs to be in place. So in previous ages, people who weren't pure devotees already could take to sannyasa and still get purified and not fall down necessarily. In Kaliyuga, the nature of lust is different, though. The nature of lust is more intense and it permeates everything, to where one cannot internally be sannyasa properly or correctly unless one's already pure in their devotion. Okay? And that's why it's not recommended in this age. All right? Not only recommended, forbidden in the vast majority of cases. Okay? Because here's the thing. If sannyasa were like that simple or that cheap of a thing, I could have taken sannyasa myself and just formally gone about it, saying I was sannyasa, because my interest is just devotion to Krishna. I'm not really interested in any of this materialistic crap. Yeah, I'm addicted to masturbation and pornography, which disqualifies me from sannyasa, but I'm still not actually interested in being in this world. Basically, it's just like a physiological addiction, but what I really want isn't in this world. It's in Goloka. That's what I really want. So the whole point is, like, you get my point? Like, anybody, if sannyasa was just a thing where, okay, I'm going to go and preach Krishna consciousness, and that's what sannyasa is, and I'm just mostly going to be celibate. If it was that easy or cheap, pretty much every single devotee on the planet could be sannyasa already right now. But it's not that cheap, it's not that easy. That's why there's 4 different varnas, okay? Sannyasa is, the standards are insanely high. So even in householder life, you're not allowed to engage in sex outside of producing children either. So practically, even as a householder, you're practically having to follow the sannyasa regulations almost. You're just allowed to have sex to produce children when your wife is able to, conceive and all this other type of stuff. So, and then brahmacharis, you have to be completely celibate to formally be brahmachari. So what to speak of sannyasa? Most of us can't even fulfill the regulations for brahmacharya even, or grihastha, or vanaprastha. So what to speak of sannyas? We can't even fulfill the functions of the other 3, which are less high standards than sannyas even, And then you say, yeah, that's because you have plenty of previous births as sannyasi, though, but I understand. You'll speaking to specifics. Well, what I'm saying is, yeah, if somebody is able to take sannyas in Kaliyuga, that's fine, but they really have to actually be a pure devotee already. Like, you can't mess around and not be a pure devotee and take sannyas, because you won't be a sannyasi behind closed doors unless that's the case. You'll be having sex, you'll be ejaculating, you'll be meditating on sex with women, you just won't be telling people about it. And that's what's been going on in Krishna consciousness as a movement. That's where all the cult stuff has come in, and that's why so many people have been misled from Krishna consciousness and strayed away, because they've been associating our movement with a bunch of false people who aren't actually acharyas, and they've also been associating it with people who spend all their time calling out these false acharyas without also engaging in the process. So when people come in, they're not seeing Harinama Sankirtana engaged in 24/7, which uplifts everyone, right? Instead, they're seeing just devotees quarreling with each other. One side, they're opposing the false sannyasis, which is true. Most of the sannyasis were false. And then on the other side, you're having these people fanaticize about Prabhupada, direct devotion to him only, and that's what everybody has to do, no matter what. So basically, on the other side, you have this other cult thing developing, basically, where Prabhupada is used as a sin-dumping, where basically everybody just uses Prabhupada to dump their sins on. You see? So you have these 2 extremes, neither of which are accurate or correct completely in their thinking. And then what the real fact is that it's all about Harinama Sankirtana, with or without initiation. So spontaneous love, giving love to others, giving pure devotion to Krishna to others. That's actually what our movement is, and what's always been about. It's never been about initiation or anything like that, or specifics thereof. Never. And it never will be about that. But that's what others are seeing coming in, so they've been associating our movement with a cult-like thing, and Aindra Prabhu called this out too. He's like, this externalized public vision of our movement will end and change if when they're coming in, they're actually getting the Yuga Dharma. They're actually being invited to take part in the Yuga Dharma of chanting the holy names 24/7 and preach correctly about Radha and Krishna, about pure devotional service, and they're going to be meeting honest people. So they won't see it as a cult anymore, because it's not a cult thing like that. It's actually the actual function of the living being, right? So it's simple. I mean, it's simple. The stigma that the public has towards the movement is very easy to fix. It can be fixed overnight, immediately. No problem. It just requires the devotees themselves altogether to actually engage in the process. And this is what Aindra Prabhu is constantly speaking about. And since Aindra Prabhu is Radha and Krishna's eternal manjari, their eternal associate, just like Bhaktisiddhanta is, just like Prabhupada is, okay? Therefore, his preaching was along the same lines that their preaching was. Basically, we have to actually preach, we have to actually engage in Harinama Sankirtana, and we have to actually constantly distribute these books along with this in the process, right? And only then can we actually be qualified to, if we desire to later, engage in Babaji if we want to. But even then, there's no necessity. What's actually more important is to continue on preaching and spreading the holy names. So that's more recommended than taking Babaji even, you know, that whole thing, the Babaji dress. Yeah, have a good night, Robin. Thanks for hopping in. And of course, you can watch it anytime. It'll be on YouTube tomorrow, and tonight, actually. Okay, so you said, well, yeah, if you want to talk about Kaliyuga-ish energy infiltrating the whole life, all you have to do is look at the tainted teachings of Tantra all over the world that affects the whole world. Yeah, I totally get you. Okay, thanks for explaining. Big meta for your expressions. Yeah, so what's going on is, I'm going to actually cover that in a different video also, the whole Tantra mixed with Bhakti thing, because from what I understand from my astrology and how my psychology is in this life, in my past life, basically I was engaging in devotion to Radha and Krishna, but I was engaging in Bhakti yoga mixed with Tantra, okay? Basically, so I was engaging in devotion to Radha and Krishna, Lord Chaitanya and stuff, but it was mixed with this like tantric sex ritual type stuff that I was fixated on also in the process, okay, of doing that, basically. And that's kind of what rubbed off onto my consciousness into this life and stuff, and why and how I see things the way I do a lot, right? But I know the distinction between Tantra and actual Bhakti Yoga very clearly now, whereas before it wasn't as exactly clear to me as it is now, as much. Somewhat there, but much in this life it's much more clarified. The distinction is much more clear. So, yeah, basically, and that's what was going on during Bhaktisiddhanta's time as well. When he appeared, there was all this, and Bhaktivinoda's time, and Lord Chaitanya's appearance even. There was always this, like, pretty much the whole world was just engaging in illicit sex under the excuse of it being to purify themselves and to achieve liberation and salvation and stuff like that. That's mainly what was going on throughout the world, in Bengal and everywhere else. And that's always what things tend to shift back into, you know. Things always tend to shift back into that tantric sex ritual stuff when people deviate from pure devotional principles, and that gives devotional service and Krishna consciousness a really bad name throughout the world when people deviate to that stuff. So it takes the actual acharyas coming back in, calling this stuff out, putting an end to it, and then bringing in the actual truth again and again and again. It happens every time. So every time you'll notice there's a sincere, like fully pure acharya coming and appearing, it's always, and this is what Krishna says specifically, it's very interesting, he comes through his devotees too. So whenever and wherever there's a decline of religion and a predominant rise of irreligion, at that time I descend myself. That also applies to him descending along with his pure devotees in their hearts and having them descend also, okay? So his message being spoken through the pure devotees is him descending also, without him necessarily physically descending, like he did when he appeared 5,000 plus years ago. Nowadays he mostly descends through his pure devotees in every era. So in every era, basically this happens once a pure devotee or pure acharya passes away, goes back to Goloka, his institution, or whatever the institution that he gets established because of the influence of Kaliyuga, gets taken over, gets infiltrated if the people aren't engaging in Harinama Sankirtan and the correct teachings. Then it requires somebody else or a group of other individuals to come in, clarify that, and then start it anew, basically. Over and over like this. So, can you tell us about the Krishna Consciousness in Indiana Jones's Temple of Doom? I'll have to watch that again. I remember watching that before, and I'm pretty sure I vaguely know what you're talking about, but it's been so long I'd have to watch that again to understand what you're referring to exactly. The thing is, yeah, Krishna consciousness can be seen in everything indirectly, right? And it's Radha and Krishna's messages to us are in everything indirectly. But there are certain areas and certain things where they encode things to us specifically, like purposefully, to all devotees and stuff like that. And that's why I covered those 3 music videos, because they do it through music a lot, actually. But there's certain key songs that they do it through, and you have to be able to understand what the message is, what to look for, how to verify and prove that they've encoded something, because it correlates with pure devotional activities in terms of time frame of songs, lyrics, exactly what happens in music videos, if there is a music video done on such things. So many things like this. And that can happen in movies too, but the point is, as devotees, we can see everything as Radha and Krishna themselves doing everything, right, as devotees. However, there are certain things that they do directly also, which can be distinguished from just indirect everything that they're doing that we can see as them doing directly. I hope that makes sense, okay? So basically there's a lot of things in the world that devotees themselves can see as devotional and understand their connection with Radha and Krishna. And then there's other things that Radha and Krishna themselves actually do directly and show us in this world in hidden forms and stuff that we need to pay attention to. So there's two different things going on. Technically speaking, yes, they are actually engaged directly in everything, but I guess you could say they're more so directly involved in certain things than others, you know. So, so yeah, basically, so what Aindra Prabhu is teaching is so very important for devotees to understand in this age, because this is the next phase. This should have actually been the phase of Chaitanya's movement immediately after it appeared, that continued on continually throughout the world. But that's the thing, you know, individuals have free will, and sometimes things go slower, sometimes things go faster. So the next phase of Krishna Consciousness is what Aindra Prabhu wrote in his book, The Heart of Transcendental Books Distribution. So everyone, please read this book. Please read it from start to finish, top to bottom, and understand the principles discussed therein. Okay? Now, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, this is very important. Aindra Prabhu very much strongly emphasized this point. Bhaktisiddhanta himself is known for being a pure celibate brahmachari, then sannyasi his entire life, purely celibate. Now, he specifically taught us that we must, Bhaktisiddhanta taught us this, we must focus on developing our relationship with Radha and Krishna, and then and only then can the anartha nivritti side of things actually take place. If we focus on the anartha nivritti side, in other words, if we focus on purifying ourselves of impurities as our main focus, there's every chance and possibility that we will take to ultimately what's called syncretic Brahmavadi, or in other words, we'll end up taking to impersonalism if we focus in that direction. So Bhaktisiddhanta said we must not focus on that, and when he did start giving lectures on the intimate Ashtakaliya Leelas and stuff, he told his audience, he said, I'm going to start revealing this to you and discussing this even though I know you're not ready for it. Okay? Because the importance of this information is so essential that even though the devotees weren't ready for it en masse, he had to discuss it and had to talk about it, because that was the only way they could actually overcome the anartha nivritti side, right? Whereas up to that point, people were just using the Ashtakaliya Leelas to justify illicit sex behind closed doors, to basically justify Babaji while meditating on sexual things, and all. That's what they were using it for before Bhaktisiddhanta, in most cases, right? So that's why he roared against it, because he knew that that was what was going on, okay? So, and you say, technically, Lord Chaitanya Dharma is still circulating, so we're here now. Exactly. Lord Chaitanya's movement is still spreading. We're actually in the midst of Lord Chaitanya's movement now. His Leelas didn't end when he returns to Shvetadvipa in Goloka. Just Shvetadvipa is the Chaitanya Lila version of Goloka. And yeah, so they're still going on. So literally, we can purify ourselves to tap into our original consciousness and actually, technically speaking, convert these temporary forms into one of our Chaitanya Lila forms that we have that branches off from our original Chaitanya Lila form. Okay? Which is, we have an eternal Chaitanya Lila form and an eternal Vraja Lila Swarupa as well, which is our eternal preference. But from that, we can have all sorts of different branch-off forms and pastime preaching forms as well that will be classified once we leave our bodies as Svarupas. In other words, Chaitanya Lila Svarupas in this world. Okay? Hope that makes sense. So, can you tell us the link of the lectures about Anartha Nivritti? Yeah. Okay, so there's a series of lectures by Aindra Prabhu called, they're named on YouTube, Everything is Radha. Somebody named them this, and that's correct, but a person must understand that in correct context, but that's what they're called, and that is correct, but in the understanding of what Radha and Krishna teach about themselves, the super-personal understanding. So it's not that everything is Radha in terms of like this amalgamated oneness, it's that everything is Radha in terms of she is the source of everything and involved and causing everything to happen and with us in everything, basically. So that's what's being referred to there. In other words, we are still individuals also from Radha and Krishna, but they're still within us and we're parts of them, more or less. Okay. So that lecture, he talks about this in those series of lectures. Everything is Radha. You can type it in on YouTube. I normally post them a lot, actually. I'll probably post them after this video even, again. And he talks about this, the lectures of Bhaktisiddhanta. Because what Bhaktisiddhanta did, when he actually, because Bhaktisiddhanta would sit there and he would actually, there was one instance, at least one instance, I think he did this many, many times though, where, or similar things many times, where he would read Shriyas Upanishad, okay, And he would just keep reading that for days and days and days and days, the verses from that, and then explaining, discussing this and stuff, discussing these principles of relationship with Krishna and stuff from Sri Upanishad. And then he wouldn't touch on the Ashtakaliya Leelas or the pastimes of Krishna and the gopis at all. He did that specifically to get all the fake Babajis and all the guys who were just looking for illicit sex, like meditations and imaginative stuff, to go away, because those individuals don't correctly appreciate Radha and Krishna, and they don't actually see things from the pure loving perspective. They see things from a lustful perspective, passed off as, devotional. So he knew this, and so once he got all the bogus people to leave, once the only people left in the assembly were actually sincere devotees, because only sincere devotees would actually appreciate Sri Upanishad and actually be able to stay awake the whole time listening to Sri Upanishad. Then those were the individuals that he revealed the Ashtakaliya Leelas to and the deeper intimate things to. Okay? So put it this way, if we were to sit there in Bhaktisiddhanta's lectures, okay, and we paid attention to what he was saying in the Sri Upanishad and stuff, and we never left the assembly, he would reveal to us also the Ashtakaliya Leelas intimate stuff once he saw that we were actually sincere about understanding these things. Okay? But that's how he sifted people out. He would actually sift out the fakes and the flakes from the genuine people, because the fakes and the flakes would be like, oh, there's no rasa here. That's what you'll hear this a lot. They'll be like, oh, there's no rasa. I want where there's rasa. What they're talking about, basically, they want to hear about the intimate, transcendental sexual pastimes between Radha, Krishna, and the gopis. That's what they're wanting to hear about, so that they can imagine in their brains having sex with women in this world and having sex with Radha and Krishna in Manjari and Gopi forms in Goloka. That's why they wanted to hear about those things. But Bhaktisiddhanta, he knew they didn't have the correct consciousness, so he was like, but he understood that the ones who would stay were the ones who had the consciousness of actually wanting to develop pure love for Radha and Krishna and correctly understand these pastimes. Okay? Hey, welcome, Rick. Glad to have you, man. Yeah, so I encourage you all to talk to Rick Pelch, get in contact with him, befriend him, and discuss these principles with him, Krishna Consciousness, because he's my very good friend, and he has been with me the whole time. We've been in different parts of the world, but in terms of heart-to-heart, being brothers in arms in devotion, we've been rock solid the whole time, all these years. So get in contact with him and talk to him. Very wonderful devotee, for certain. Okay? So basically, now that we've covered all these topics, and I encourage you, Rick, if you get a chance to watch the earlier parts of this video, we cover a lot of things about Aindra Prabhu's glories, what he taught, and so many different things. So now at this later half, basically, we're going to shift this more to the discussion phase now. Okay, this might end up running to be a 1.5 hour or 2 hour one. Normally I end them at like an hour or 108 or something like that. But so you guys go ahead and start chiming in. Looks like we got 3 viewers at the moment. If there's anything you guys wanted mentioned or specifically covered, and things like that. So right now what we're talking about, Rick, is we're talking about Bhaktisiddhanta and how he sifted out the fakes and flakes from the real sincere devotees. Okay? So this is very important to remember. You'll run into this nowadays too. And this is how you can sift out those who are actually Prakriti Sahajya inclined from actual sincere devotees. In other words, the ones inclined towards Prakriti Sahajya stuff are going to be the ones who are going to go to, yes, mostly the now, the weed smoking, you mentioned this earlier, and now that Rick is on and now that some other people are on, I know who have had a, or I should say, who have been surrounded by people who have had an issue with this, okay, or associated with this. The thing is, we'll cover this now, okay? Because this is actually connected to this exact topic, exactly what you were talking about. Because you said the weed thing wasn't really acknowledged or pointed out or called out until Bhaktisiddhanta appeared, or it wasn't so much like a big thing, right? First off, I would correct that and clarify that it actually was. But the reason it wasn't a big thing or seen as a big thing is because no one until Bhaktisiddhanta appeared. In other words, there were only like literally a handful of individuals before Bhaktisiddhanta, like Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and like single individuals who were correctly following the principles of pure devotion. Pretty much everyone else everywhere around them was following like distorted versions of devotional service. So one of the last demons Krishna kills, which is I think it's Vyomasura, or one of the last pastimes that Krishna engages in the Vrindavana Leelas. I'll have to refresh my memory on which one this is. Bhaktivinoda talks about it, but it has specifically to do with Krishna removing one of those last demons where the devotee thinks that smoking weed actually is helping them in their devotion, right? Either directly or indirectly. And that's actually a misconception. So Krishna kills that demon also ultimately in the devotee's heart and mind. And so here's the thing. With the weed smoking, what it does, basically, it puts the consciousness, and the way it intoxicates the consciousness, it puts the consciousness in a pseudo-spiritual, pseudo-devotional place between material conditioning and transcendence. So in many ways, it can actually be more of a trap than just being materialistic and not using pot at all in the first place. Okay? That's what was going on. And Bhaktisiddhanta called this out because he knew and he could see clearly that if one is smoking weed or ganja and they're engaging in this, they're also by default engaging in illicit sex. Because it's impossible to actually be using weed to any degree whatsoever, like intentionally or voluntarily, without also engaging in illicit sex as well. Okay? And Bhaktisiddhanta knew this, and he can see this very clearly, that so basically if somebody's using weed, that means by default they're engaging in illicit sex also. At the very least on the mental internal level they are. Okay? Hands down. And it's a very, very strong addiction. Now there are many, many, many devotees who are addicted to smoking weed. Many devotees. In fact, it's probably as common, maybe even more common, at least as equally common as porn addiction is among devotees and amongst people in general. Weed addiction is also there, right? So this is very important to understand because with weed addiction, because it puts the consciousness in this pseudo-spiritual state between devotion and between material conditioning, it convinces the devotee that a lot of the things they're experiencing with the weed are actually devotional and are actually like transcendental when they're actually illusory. So basically they get this false enthusiasm is what happens, okay? And that false enthusiasm is basically like a trap for the consciousness, okay? Because you basically think you're having devotional experiences, you think all these things are happening, but really what's going on is you're just remaining addicted to weed and not recognizing it, basically. So this is what I've observed from my end, okay, about this whole weed pot thing. I've observed this clearly in every case, and I've not run into any exception, you know. And I love all my friends and stuff, even if they have this issue. I don't judge them for it or anything, because I have my own issues, you know, with porn and stuff too. So I'm not judging anyone. I'm just saying that in order to even begin overcoming the illicit sex stuff, you have to give up the weed. There's no way you can even begin overcoming illicit sex addiction without giving up weed first, because illicit sex is always the last to go. You have to basically clear yourself of the other three first, then you can actually start working on the no illicit sex solidly, earnestly. But if you don't, you're going to be stuck on the illicit sex thing, okay, period. It's just you're not going to overcome it, you know. Now, what I've observed myself, and I'm sure Bhaktisiddhanta observed this also, Prabhupada also observed this, that when someone smokes weed, they never actually acknowledge or are aware that they're addicted to it. I've observed this in every case. So someone will actually be addicted. That's right. That's the one. Thank you. Nanda Maharaja captured by Varuna was the one that that actually occurred. But that's also was symbolic and representational of the devotee thinking intoxication is devotional, actually helping them in their bhajana or meditation or whatever, right? So what happens is there's two things. Like basically no person who's addicted to pot will actually admit they're addicted to it. Everyone will say they're not addicted to it, but you look at the symptoms. Look at someone who smokes pot regularly and for whatever reason they do it, and watch them 3 days out not having pot or just a few days not smoking it. Their behavior, their demeanor, their vibe, everything will change. It's different. They become very negative, very aggressive, very angry, and in most cases they don't even realize they're doing this, okay? They don't even recognize their behavior has changed at all. They just think it's just something else aside from the pot, but it's actually the pot addiction happening. They're experiencing withdrawal without recognizing they're experiencing withdrawal, okay? Because my family grows this stuff in North California. It's been legal there for many, many years before it's legal elsewhere, and they've been growing it medicinally for many ages and stuff. And I've seen it in all of them, and I've seen it in all my friends and stuff who use it regularly. I've seen the symptoms, like when the withdrawal starts to happen, they're the nicest people in the world as long as they're smoking pot, but as soon as they don't have it, they become very irritable, very angry, very aggressive, just their vibe is totally different, you know. This very, like a lot of lethargy starts to come down on the consciousness, okay? I've seen it, and I see it time and again, over and over again, okay? But the first thing a devotee has to understand, it is an addiction. It's not just something, and it's an addiction that isn't recognized as an addiction. So, for example, like with pornography addiction, for example, like, okay, if somebody watches pornography like a couple times a week or something, masturbates or whatever, that's also an addiction. But an individual has to recognize that something is an addiction first to be able to overcome the addiction, okay? If you don't recognize it's an addiction, then you won't actually overcome it because you haven't recognized it for what it is. Okay? See what I'm saying? And you're saying, I grew marijuana, used it for years, I even know the spirit of the plant very well, and all he says is true. There you go. Yep. And anyone who's used it for a long time can very much confirm this as well. It has a very specific effect on the consciousness that's pseudo-spiritual, pseudo-devotional, pseudo all these different things, basically. And that's why it's classified as intoxication. Because intoxication doesn't just mean you're intoxicated and that you're completely separated from spirit or transcendent. No, it means you're convinced you're thinking you're absorbed in transcendental things and connected more when you're engaging in it. That's what intoxication is. Okay? Same thing with like sex indulgence and stuff. When someone's engaging in it, they might mistake that they're actually absorbed in, transcendental devotional experiences or something when it's actually just materialistic sense pleasure. You know what I'm saying? So it creates this mistakenness in the consciousness. And so, yeah, and that was actually connected with, because the same individuals that were smoking pot in most cases were the same individuals doing the false Babaji stuff, the personal meditation stuff in Radha Kunda, and in the name of renunciation and stuff. But really what they were doing was they were meditating on sex with women in their minds and hearts. Now, because Bhaktisiddhanta is eternally Radha and Krishna's Manjari, he's Nayani Manjari coming to preach in this world in Chaitanya Lila, he was sent for this purpose, to call out the deviations and stuff like that. Because if he wasn't sent, we wouldn't actually have this information. Prabhupada wouldn't have been sent. So many things. So we owe Bhaktisiddhanta everything in terms of this information we have. Okay, separating the truth from the falsehood and stuff, right? Because people can get misled so easy if there's not a pure devotee acharya setting the example. So he came and he saw this because he can read their minds. Because he's Nayani Manjari, he's in Goloka, he can understand what's going on in the minds and hearts of all other living beings. So he can read someone's mind if their actual focus and intent is to justify further sexual indulgence, and that's why they want to read the Rasa Lila or Ashtakali Aliyas or whatever. And if he sees that that's their intention in doing so, then he'll refuse them to do that, and he'll call them out for their bogusness, right? However, if he sees that an individual, and he saw this in some people, some individuals, that they might have sexual issues here or there or whatever, but they genuinely want to purify themselves and love Radha and Krishna, and they actually appreciate all the pastimes of Krishna, Sri Upanishad, the philosophy, everything else, then those people he would reveal to them the deeper things, Ashtakali Aliyah, because he knew that they would be sexually agitated hearing these things, but he knew if they were actually sincere about it, ultimately they would be benefited more than sexually agitated. Whereas in the case of the bogus guys, they would only be sexually agitated, and they would keep passing it off as devotional service, and they just wouldn't admit openly that they were engaging in sex behind closed doors or at night or masturbating or whatever they were doing, even just mentally speculating on sex during their so-called meditations. So that's why Bhaktisiddhanta, people wanted him dead for that reason, actually. They wanted to kill him because he was exposing them when no one else was exposing them. Because up to that point, they had like lots of followers and stuff, and they were being worshipped as Babajis and worshipped as, great devotees and this and that. When all they were really doing was just cheaply fooling the public by chanting on the Japamala while thinking about sex. That's what they were doing. Okay? So, and that's what's happening today, actually, too. Amongst most of the Babajis or so-called Babajis, that's really what's going on. Because here's the thing, it's easy. Anybody can go to Radhakunda, sit down somewhere, or just some solitary place, start chanting Japamala throughout the day. Somebody brings you food, worships you or this or that. I mean, we're basically doing that now. Even if we're staying at our house looking at pornography on a laptop computer or something, I mean, we may as well just call all of ourselves Babajis. It's ridiculous, you know what I'm saying? It's like in Kaliyuga, the Dharma is spreading Harinama Sankirtana and having as little of a private life as possible, like where your life is public, basically, to where there's full transparency. And what that does is it does a lot of different things. It prevents the consciousness from being able to go into like this isolated, like, sex indulgence processing of things, because the consciousness remains in terms of giving love to others, which is one's eternal function in Goloka, okay? And it keeps one from engaging in those illicit sex things. Otherwise, if one just goes in private and does all this other stuff, they're going to be thinking of illicit sex for certain, hands down, okay? And you said how to not be lethargic with Harinam. Well, the first step is you have to actually do it on a daily basis. Make it a routine, make it a habit, actually, just like brushing your teeth, just like going to bed, waking up in the morning. You have to make Harinama Sankirtana a habit that you do. In other words, you have to make it part of your existence. And to not become lethargic, you have to understand what's happening during Harinama Sankirtana. You have to understand that you are uniting other living beings in intimate relationships with Radha and Krishna directly. Okay? So literally, what you're doing in Goloka, while you're distributing books and chanting the holy names out loud, is you are intimately uniting Radha and Krishna transcendentally, physically, intimately with those individuals. That's what you're doing, okay? And focusing on doing that, knowing that Radha and Krishna will reciprocate with you when you do this, okay? Make no mistake about it, because they will be very pleased with this. That's going to keep you from getting lethargic in Harinam. And also, the second half of that is you absolutely must not change your behavior, what you say, do, or think, to get the approval of females, whether they're female devotees or not, okay? Because female devotees, in so many cases, all due respect to them and all glories to them, if they are not pure devotees already, also, they will subconsciously start demanding from you for you to preach a certain way, for you to behave a certain way during Harinama, basically for you to adjust your behavior in certain ways to them. So you must absolutely not be controlled by what females think about you. Okay? You must not care what they think, and you must go forward no matter what they think about you, even if they hate your guts. Specifically, you must transcend and not care what beautiful females think about you. Okay? Because if what you're doing, in other words, you need to do this unconditionally, because if you start contemplating, what are women going to think about me? What are beautiful women going to think about me? Are they going to approve of me or not? And so on and so forth. If you start thinking that way on a subconscious level, that's the sundaram part, basically. The Lord, he says, na sundaram, not what beautiful women think about me, not their approval of me. He says, I don't care for their approval, what they think about me, and I'm not interested in sex with them. Okay? Because we seek women's approval on a subconscious level because we want sex with them. All right? Now, I'm talking about beautiful women here, too. So it's easy when it's women you're not attracted to. But I'm saying if you run into a beautiful woman during Harinama Sankirtana, I ran into this actually just the other day in many cases, you know. So you run into these beautiful women who start, you know, taking your pictures and start, like, talking to you, getting, like, lovey-dovey with you and stuff, right? You cannot change your behavior. You cannot change your preaching. You cannot change your standards to please them, in the sense of making them more sensually attracted to you, because that's what will happen, okay? Because if you do that, you'll become lethargic in Harinama Sankirtana, and then your meditations will start shifting to, how can I start to be more attractive to women, and all these other different things, which always involves compromise, because women will not be attracted to you if you're engaging 24/7 in full Harinama Sankirtana, completely in pure devotional service. They won't have intimate interest in you, okay? And if they do have intimate interest in you, it'll mean that they're almost pure devotees themselves, but still, their intimate interest will still be tinged with some degree of lust, and you must avoid that, and you must transcend that, okay? Even if one's a grihasta, there still needs to be the consciousness in the case, okay? Don't change your behavior to soothe or to please your wife or placate or anything like that. Don't do it. Because females will respect you more if you do not placate to what they want and you do not seek their approval. They will respect you more, period, okay? Both on the material side and the transcendental side. So, do Harinama Sankirtana every day. Make it your habit, your routine, what you do. Understand what you're doing. Why? So that you will have the enthusiasm. Understand that it's your eternal function, eternally, not just something you're doing to go back to Godhead, okay? And also understand that it's absolutely required for you to go back to Godhead in this bodily lifetime and to achieve pure devotional service. On top of that, you must get rid of seeking women's approval. Okay, you must get rid of, from your consciousness, seeking beautiful women's approval. Because Lord Chaitanya and Radha Krishna, they approve of you, and they're infinitely more beautiful than any woman in the material world ever could be. And they're more beautiful than all the women combined in the material world, period. So, and this is a fact, okay? And their beauty is ever increasing. So you have the approval of the most beautiful woman ever, which is Shri Radha, okay? The source of all the other beautiful women that we're lustfully attracted to and things like that. So, understand what you're doing. This is like number one. Yes, exactly. You must understand what you're doing correctly. Okay? So, I hope that makes sense, and I hope that's very much understood in the consciousness now. Okay? Because, welcome Ishvari Nandini. Thank you for joining us. So yeah, in essence, the thing is, because you're going to run into these situations, I guarantee you, it starts like this. It's this process. So when you start engaging in Harinama Sankirtana daily, you become more attractive to females on a subconscious level, okay? And this applies to females. You become more attractive to males on a subconscious level also, okay? And on a conscious level. So what I'm saying is, when you're running into members of the opposite sex and things like this, you know, or if someone's homosexual, the same principle. When you start running into these situations, people will start getting lovey-dovey, sensually intimate, because when you're engaging in your eternal function of Harinama Sankirtana, your eternal beauty starts to come out to various degrees, okay? So all of us were lustfully attracted to Radha and Krishna to various degrees in various ways. And then that comes out in us also, so that others, if they're still materially conditioned, they're going to have attraction to you when you're engaging in Harinama Sankirtana. And if they're beautiful females and stuff like this, they're basically going to be looking at you from like a lustful type perspective. They're going to appreciate to some degree your devotional activities, but it's going to be mixed with lustful feelings and thoughts. It starts there, and then what then ends up happening is then the individual starts to change their behavior. Or if you're in a male body, you'll start to change your behavior to try and make yourself more attractive to the females during Harinama Sankirtana. Okay, that's where it begins. And then in the process of thinking that way, you'll gradually shift out of enthusiasm for Harinama Sankirtana, and it'll start to dwindle. Okay, and then you'll start focusing on all this other stuff. And if you're in a female body, the same thing will happen. You'll start focusing on how do I attract men more, how do I become more attractive to them, and then your enthusiasm for Harinama Sankirtana will dwindle also. Okay, so you watch out for that. It always begins by you encountering or running into a beautiful female who appreciates your kirtana, or a handsome man, if you're in a female body, who appreciates your kirtana, you're very attracted to. And then what happens is they will basically start to allure you lustfully in ways that basically, because your desires are able to be fulfilled very easily during Harinama Sankirtana, both material and spiritual. So if you go in the direction of your material desires being fulfilled, you'll notice a proportionate decrease in Harinama enthusiasm. Okay, but if you keep focusing, in spite of that, on pure devotional service, on continuing to spread the holy name and not changing your behavior to suit them, you don't change the preaching, you don't change the philosophy, you don't change the standards. Okay, in spite of what might happen, they may stop liking you, stop being attracted, and that is what will happen actually in most cases. It's actually a test from Radha and Krishna for us. Okay, because what will happen is the test will basically be, okay, they'll show attraction to begin with, but then if you don't change your behavior, then they'll lose attraction for you. So basically you look at it as, oh, I missed a lustful opportunity, basically, right? Subconsciously you'll look at it this way. Oh, I should have preached differently. I should have done this differently because I could have had this attractive female in my life if I had just continued speaking this way, or if I had just behaved a little differently or something. That's what starts to happen, and then you start to regret and all this other stuff. And I'm just like, no, because this actually happened to me. But I analyzed my subconscious, and I was like, nope, I'm trying to change my behavior subconsciously and talk differently. It's because I'm attracted to this female, and I'm trying to figure out ways to allure her to me more. And I was like, no, that's not actually how it works. So yeah, watch out for that. Krishna will test you like this, and you'll see it happen when you engage in kirtana. And you'll become famous in the material world as well. So here's the thing: you'll become famous devotionally, and you'll also become empowered devotionally. But you'll also become famous on the material, lustful side as well. So people will become attracted to you. They'll want to encounter you more and interact with you. But it's going to be lust-based if they're materialists or if they're devotees and stuff. This is why people who are experiencing extremely lustful lives and a lot of satisfaction in their lustful lives in this bodily lifetime, it's because in their previous lives they engaged in Harinama Sankirtana for the pleasure of Radha and Krishna, but they strayed away due to their lustful desire starting to be fulfilled. Okay, that's what happens, and that's why they're still experiencing the continual results of that Harinama Sankirtana in another life, forgetting what's the cause of the results now, right? And then later on, if they continue to forget that and don't come back to it, they'll end up going back to Yamaraja and all this other stuff. So it's very important to not allow those things to lure us away from pure devotional principles. All right. And then you said, and I'll add the same. We start to actually the precise moment where their energy starts rejecting us, when we don't placate and please their warped views and stick to the teachings. I've actually placated plenty of times because that feeling of rejection is a kind of subconscious pain. It is, yes. And that's the thing. And we experience that pain because we're absorbed in the externalized perception of who they are and who we are. In other words, we're considering ourselves the enjoyers, okay, or the supreme enjoyers, and as females, considering ourselves the supreme enjoyed, okay, of males, of the male energy, all right? So yes, so here's the thing: Radha and Krishna never reject us. So we have to understand that, and that's the difference between transcendental pure love and lust. When there's lust involved, you will always be rejected at some point, and down the road or in the future. Basically, you're accepting people accepting you and rejecting you will be on the conditional level. So their acceptance of you will be lust-based, not loving-based, and their rejection of you will also be lust-based too. So both will have to happen. Whenever there's lust, there will be rejection. Period. Wherever there's pure love, there will never be rejection. So that's the difference. So when that starts to happen, I just look at, you know what? Radha and Krishna themselves eternally are accepting me. They're not rejecting me. This conditioned living entity might be rejecting me, but that's just their conditioning. It has nothing to do with me at all. Okay, they're not actually rejecting me either. They're just identifying with their external body and mind, right? And I'm not going to take part in that identification because I know where that leads, right? It starts off like nectar and then it turns into poison, right? Krishna makes this very clear for a reason. So if you're experiencing sensual pleasure, bodily sensual pleasure, you can know for a certainty that it will be followed by pain and anguish afterwards as a natural mechanical result of that pleasure, okay? Sensual pleasure indulgence, and that being the focus, all right? Now, if one is grateful for sensual pleasure and seeing it as the causeless mercy of Radha and Krishna, that will prevent it from later on turning into pain, because you'll actually keep focusing on the pure devotional principle in that direction. But the second you start to think your pleasure is due to something you've done or due to your own efforts or activities, that's immediately when you start to fall down, and that's immediately when you descend back into lustful material consciousness more. You see what I'm saying? So the idea is, whatever level we're at, we need to keep advancing from that level and not descend further. That's the ideal, okay? So as long as we keep ourselves from descending further and advance from our standpoint, actually improve, we're on the right track, we're good, okay? But as soon as we start to allow ourselves to descend and our consciousness to be degraded, then we need to bring ourselves back, okay? So, yeah, looks like we got Vikram. Welcome, Vikram, as well. Varnandi, Gabriel. Okay, does anyone else have any points they wanted to bring up? Looks like this one might end up being a 2-hour session. I don't see any reason to end it earlier, so feel free to take the floor, somebody. And next week, the next couple weeks, we're actually going to start doing video chats with multiple people, where you can actually see us talking face to face, so we can actually have discussions instead of just me talking mostly and writing. So we can actually have some reciprocity with devotees worldwide. So the next couple of weeks. But in the meantime, is there anything else anybody wanted to bring up? So we've covered mostly Aindra Prabhu's glories. We covered what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur taught regarding deviant consciousness, lustful consciousness versus correct, sincere devotional understanding, so on and so forth. We've covered what Harinama Sankirtana is, the actual glories of Shri Radha, all these different things. Pot smoking, what that actually does to the consciousness, why it's forbidden, so many other things like this. So, looks like there's 4 viewers at the moment. Okay, all right, so what I'm going to start talking about then, since no one's mentioning anything specifically at this time, is I'm going to start talking about specifically what's happening during Harinama Sankirtana in terms of what you'll actually experience going out in this process. Okay, so when you're out in the public, when you're actually chanting the Mahamantra, you're literally changing the atmosphere around you. Okay, so you're altering how people are seeing everything on a subconscious level, even without them realizing it. You're uplifting them devotionally without them seeing this actually happening. So what's going on is you're actually pleasing very much so all the demigods. So what you'll feel physiologically, even on the physical level, is your entire body will feel surcharged, like every cell in your body, every nerve ending, because Radha and Krishna are happy with you inside, and naturally the demigods who predominate over the bodily sense functions also are happy and satisfied, so they start helping you. They start fulfilling your sensual desires because they're pleased, okay? So they start heightening your sensual awareness of everything, your sensational feeling of touch and all this stuff, and your feeling of happiness and everything else. All these things increase like crazy on all levels, okay? Because everyone's pleased with you. Everyone who's actually involved in managing the universe, managing your material body, also is pleased, okay? Because all the demigods are also servants of Krishna. Some of them are pure devotees, some of them are mixed devotees, but they're all together happy, and they enliven and surcharge your bodily system, okay? So in Kaliyuga, the only reason for our misery and frustration and cause of all this anguish is when we're not engaging in Harinama Sankirtana. Those things start to come back every time if we're in Kali Yuga, which we are, okay? So humility means this. And tolerance means doing what needs to be done no matter what the result is. It doesn't mean just pussyfooting around and being a little wimp in a corner. No, it means you do what needs to be done and you tolerate the results no matter what those results are, okay? If people want you shot dead or trying to kill you or this or that, that is what the meaning of tolerance is, okay? And humility. And humility also means that you recognize you have the brain substance that you are fallen, that we are fallen, and that we're not qualified for any other process aside from Harinama Sankirtana, and also understanding that we're not qualified for Harinama either. Okay? Hare Krishna, Ishvaranandini. So, understanding this, you have to understand this is what humility means. It means you realize you're not qualified for any process at all, and that everything that's happening is the causeless mercy of Radha and Krishna. You have to realize this, and you have to fully realize this to be inspired to Harinama Sankirtana, because then you'll actually see it as your only hope for anything, and then you will experience this contrast. You'll experience that when you're doing Harinama Sankirtana, you feel wonderful, everything's going great, but then when you're not doing it, everything's disastrous. It's different, okay? There's a different sensation that's going on, all right? Because even when you're doing Harinama Sankirtana, and there's people showing anger or showing disturbance or scoffing or whatever, you're still going to feel surcharged in a way that you're not when you're not doing it, okay? It's still going to be a distinct feeling, and and so you have to make this a habit, though. It's like fasting. It takes 4 days when you fast to get rid of the hunger, and then the hunger comes back like 2 or some weeks later. But in the case of Harinama Sankirtana, going through that 3 or 4 day hump, where basically on day 4 or day 5, it finally becomes a part of your solid routine, where it's ingrained in your system, and then you keep going with it from that point, and it just becomes continual, right? And as long as you keep on with the routine and the habit, you'll be good to go, basically. Just like your teeth will stay clean and healthy if you continue to brush them every day, clean them, take care of them and stuff. So, so yeah, this is very important and quite essential, because you'll notice this, even in cases where we have otherwise perfectly wonderful interactions with devotees, if the devotees aren't engaging in Harinama Sankirtana, Kali will find a way. He will find any way he possibly can to start getting you involved in quarrel with the other devotee, if you're not engaging in Harinama Sankirtana together consistently, okay? And when you stop doing it, he'll try to find a way to create quarrel between you, okay? He always is doing this. So the personality of Kali is always trying to find some little way, in other words, where both devotees will try to find something in the subconscious that they're not satisfied with in the other devotee, or something that bothers them, some area of disagreement, and then they'll start focusing on that more, and basically subconsciously start coming up with reasons why they can't engage in Harinama Sankirtana. That's Kali at work. He's at work doing that. So, and he's only able to do that and go to work doing that when we're not together engaged in this process, okay? You'll see this. You'll see all these arguments start to pop up. You'll see all these little tidbit things. Oh, I don't like the way you're doing this, or I'd prefer if you did it this way, or this, that. Just all these little tidbit nitpickety things. You see what I'm saying? And those are just excuses. They're subconscious excuses on our end to not engage in Harinama Sankirtana. Basically, it's Kali trying to get in your mind and convince you, oh, there's something about this devotee you don't like or agree with, therefore you need to start focusing on that more, and that's a good reason not to engage in Kirtana with them, basically. That's how Kali works. Don't make any mistake about that. He's purposefully doing this to you, okay? And he attacks me, and he tries to affect me with more lustful desires on Ekadashis. He's done this so many times, where basically I have this huge, insane-like urge to eat a huge amount of food and to, engage in sex a lot, or, to masturbate a lot that day. Every Ekadashi he does this. And it's because it's Ekadashi, and because Kali himself is empowered on Ekadashi, why it's so important that we actually observe Ekadashi correctly and do Harinama Sankirtana on Ekadashi. Because if we don't, he comes in and he attacks each individual at their weak spots, okay? And you'll see this happening. So when this starts to happen, when you start to feel quarrelsome towards another devotee, or start to focus on their faults or negatives, things you don't like or disagree with, shift your consciousness back to, okay, am I myself engaging in Harinama Sankirtana? Am I or am I not? Shift it away from trying to focus on what you're not liking about the devotee, focus on what you're doing in your own devotional life in terms of your own upliftment and your love for them, okay, beyond this bodily stuff, right? Because here's the thing, we're each individuals, so it's impossible for any individual to completely please every other individual in terms of how they preach, how they speak, how they act, how they behave, because in actual devotional life, familiarity breeds respect, and more respect, and more respect, and more love. If familiarity is breeding contempt for other devotees, in other words, if you're starting to take them cheaply, or disliking them more, the more you're getting to know them, then that means you're engaging in material consciousness towards those devotees. You're not engaging in transcendental consciousness towards them. Because devotees don't like each other less over time. They like each other more if they're actually engaged in the Yuga Dharma, okay, as devotees. This quarrel crap only pops in amongst devotees if they let Kali himself influence how they see others and how they interact with others, all right? So Pay attention. It happens all the time. And social media is a cesspool of Kali's power to get devotees to start disagreeing, because everybody can hide behind these screens and stuff, and they don't have to face-to-face interact. So therefore, they can just say all this stuff and like get nitpickety and get like, you know, they can come up with reasons why they're disagreeing or why somebody's not fully pure or this or that. Those things don't actually matter, though. What matters is, are you yourself engaging in the Yuga Dharma? You know, that's all that matters. What other people are doing doesn't actually make a difference. It only makes a difference in terms of you preaching against it if they're preaching completely incorrectly and they're not actually pushing in the direction of the Yuga Dharma, okay? Here's the point. Even if somebody's preaching incorrectly about like side branch things, if their central thing that they're teaching or preaching is the importance of Harinama Sankirtana, that's still correct preaching, okay? So they could be the biggest rascal in the world, it doesn't matter who they are. If they're encouraging others, yes, this is the Yuga Dharma, this is what we're all supposed to be doing, that's correct preaching. So ultimately what they're preaching is correct, even if they're making mistakes in every other way aside from that point. You see what I'm saying? They're still doing you a great service, and vice versa. If someone's preaching that to you, you're receiving a great service, okay? So we must do this with other devotees. We must engage in the Yuga Dharma with them, because this is the only way that Kali will be defeated, and he'll be defeated and not allowed to creep into our consciousness. All right. So so this whole like sex obsession, this intoxication obsession, all this gambling obsession, all this stuff, all of this is coming from that personality himself. He also prayed to Krishna to get this power, and he was granted this power over all these different ages in the universe. Okay. He was also engaged in devotion to Krishna, glorifying him, and that's why he himself was empowered to be Kali. Okay. So even he was empowered by Krishna to get that position. So even if you want a material benediction, and even if you want to become a being who's powerful like Kali, like that, can influence other people, you still have to engage in devotion to Krishna to achieve that. There's no way you can't engage in devotion to Krishna to achieve it. Even Hiranyakashipu had to engage in devotion to Krishna by meditating on him in anger to get his power, to get the benediction from Lord Brahma, to be able to perform that tapasya. Okay? He wouldn't have been able to get those powers without that devotion to Krishna, which it consists of him fixating his mind on Krishna and pastime anger. Okay? So you're saying basically the force pushing our shadows out of us. Great meditation on for Yuga Dharma. Correct, exactly. Because the Yuga Dharma is our eternal function, and because Kaliyuga is the perverted reflection of our eternal relationship with Radha Krishna in Rasa Lila and in the intimate Madhurya Leelas of the other four as well, because that's what Harinama Sankirtana is, literally. Therefore, basically, in Kali Yuga, we have to be absorbed in one or the other. We either have to be absorbed in Harinama Sankirtana, which is our eternal function in Goloka, real time, or we're going to be absorbed in the perverted reflection of Goloka, real time, which is lust, which is meditate. No matter what we're claiming or doing or chanting Japamala, all this stuff, that's not actually going to be taking place unless the Yuga Dharma is our central focus, because the Yuga Dharma is our eternal Dharma. It's not just the Yuga Dharma. This is actually the main point Aindra Prabhu kept bringing up over and over and over again, that Harinama Sankirtana is not just Kali Yuga Dharma. It is literally the eternal Dharma of the living entity, beyond Kali Yuga. Okay? Literally. And so that's why it's the only process for Kali Yuga, because the purificatory processes in Kali Yuga don't work. You have to actually be engaged in your pure existence directly, real time, in order to be purified. You can't, basically, in other words, you can't go through a process to get purified. You have to actually be immersed in what is eternally purifying in Kali Yuga to get purified. Okay? That's why Lord Chaitanya says there's no other way, there's no other way, there's no other way. Yes, no problem, Ishvari. I know what people in Europe and stuff, this tends to be a very late time for them. They need to get rest. Same thing with Robin. That's fine. Don't feel like obligated, like you have to watch these live or anything like that. They'll be on YouTube. You can watch them anytime. Message is always going to be there. Yeah, so have a good night, Ishvari. I wish you well, and rest well, okay? So thanks for joining us, Mark, as well. We decided to carry this one on for about a solid 2 hours. We covered a lot of cool ground so far. I always like Mark when he pops up because he's really into like a lot of the conspiracy stuff with me. I've always been a big fan of studying into that stuff and whatnot. But Mark, I'm telling you this also, and I'm telling any other devotees who are listening right now who are into this really deep conspiracy stuff. I'm going to be going into videos on this more in depth, okay? But I wanted to cover a lot of other topics dealing with the pure devotional stuff first, to give the basis and what's really important more so than the conspiracy thing, right? Okay, so the conspiracy will be covered in full depth, how Kali runs this world, what he's doing, all this other stuff. But we need to understand not to get caught up in, yes, I will go into this, Mark, but the thing I'm also going to emphasize very strongly is in the process of going really in depth in all this stuff, which I will do, we must not get absorbed in, wonderful, yes, there you go. See, Mark, you've been doing it, so this is very good that you've been doing it. You're setting an example for everyone else to follow, for me to follow as well, as a daily routine. So, Mark, as far as I know, you've been doing this actually, the Harinama daily for quite a while now, or at least mostly daily for a while in the Harinama Sankirtana party. So, but the point is this, not to get sidetracked or overly absorbed in the conspiracy stuff in a sense gratificatory way. Because like a lot of it's really exciting to learn about, right? And it's really intriguing and interesting how it all works. But there can be a tendency to get so absorbed in it to where we basically get absorbed in it in like a sense gratificatory mode. Like, okay, wow, this is really gratifying to figure out the next aspect of the conspiracy or the next bit of information or this is that. So it can tend to turn into like a sense gratificatory process, like the more getting more and more and more information about it, right? Instead of actually focusing on fully immersing in why we're doing Harinama Sankirtana and actually the original function we're supposed to be in. We might tend to get absorbed so much in getting excited about the conspiracy stuff that it could potentially distract us from pure devotional contemplations, is what I'm saying. So that's something I've had to look out for and call out in myself, and I mention this to others too, okay? Not to get sidetracked with the conspiracy details, basically. So, because the whole thing about understanding the conspiracies is to understand how and in what way they're the perverted reflection of what we're actually supposed to be doing, and why they're designed the way they are to stop us from doing a Harinama Sankirtana. And by so doing, that inspires us in Harinama Sankirtana so that we can understand how to resist and fight the conspiratorial stuff. Okay, so yeah, I'll cover that next week a lot, but I'm actually starting to cover it a lot more in this video too. So in brief, I'll actually just start to briefly go into this because we've pretty much covered a lot of different things up to this point. And all of this stuff is connected to the glories of Aindra Prabhu and what the true teachings of Shri Radha and everything else. Yeah. So Kali, he uses the, I'll do this in more depth later, but he uses the owl symbol because the owl symbol represents the lack of varnashrama dharma in society. So in other words, what the owl represents, basically, varnashrama dharma is associated with different parts of the body or the transcendental form of the Lord. Okay, so the arms are associated with the kshatriyas, the head is associated with the brahmanas, the stomach and the upper leg area is associated with vaishyas, and then the feet, lower legs, are associated with the shudras. Okay, so since all of these things are associated with the form of the personality of Godhead, or the expansion of his form in this world, the perversion of that is the symbol Kali prefers to use. So what that means is, what Kali first and foremost wants to do is eliminate kshatriyas from society altogether. Okay, so if you have kshatriya inclinations, which I have always had, you will have the hardest time in Kaliyuga. You will have even a more difficult time than the Brahmana inclined even also. Thankfully, I've had both inclinations for a Brahmana who instructs kshatriyas. So I've had that, so I haven't had it as bad. But if you're fully kshatriya in consciousness completely, you'll have an insanely hard time in Kaliyuga. And this is for a reason. It's because Kali really doesn't want you to get in any position of leadership or anything like that, because he knows you'll start to destroy his influence overnight. And this is what will happen actually from Harinama Sankirtana, so on and so forth. So look at it like this. Understand this. The owl, the head, is representative of the Brahmanas, these huge, big, bulgy eyes, right? Okay, and this is why the Molech symbol is associated with the owl symbol and everything else for the child sacrifice and stuff. And then the stomach, what is the owl's stomach? So the owl has the head, the eyes, this huge, big, bulgy stomach, right, in terms of the proportions. That huge, big, bulgy stomach emphasizes the corrupt vaishyas. In other words, the businessmen, the corporate leaders of Kali Yuga who worship Kali. Okay? So in other words, basically you have would-be vaishyas getting out of hand, going excessively too far with the money stuff and with the corporate stuff, which Kali likes. He likes to encourage that. And then the head, basically the false would-be brahmanas, are completely in cahoots with those corrupt vaishyas, right? And then you have the no arms at all, just the big wings that are flat like this, which represents no kshatriyas at all. So basically you have something that can fly. So you have false brahmanas, false vaishyas, And the legs, which are like the claws, right, at the bottom, basically they're the Shudras doing the dirty work for the corrupt Vaishyas and the corrupt would-be Brahmanas, okay? That's why they're claws, because they're designed to grab and rip at things and destroy things, right? And then you have the wings, which is basically society flying and soaring and being quote-unquote fakely successful, but with no kshatriyas, because there's no arms, there's just the wings. You see what I'm saying? And there's actually a statue in Idaho. I'll actually go into the Capitol building and take a picture of the statue for you guys. I've posted the statue before. Literally, I'm not even kidding you. This statue is a statue of wings, like an angel wings, like a human form that has very beautiful female form, but the head is missing and the arms are missing. Like, and I'm kidding. I'm not even kidding you. The arms are like exactly cut off right where the arm begins, and the head's exactly cut off where the head begins. But then you have wings, full wings, and then the body. That is put in this Capitol building. It's basically Kali just spitting it in our face, okay? And this is the same reason why the Bohemian Grove crap is going on and all this other stuff. It's because when Kali faces Kalki, when he appears later on, his banner that's going to be flying is going to be the owl symbol on the banner. And that's representative. It's representative of the lack of Varnashrama Dharma and Kali's intentional, purposeful stopping of Varnashrama Dharma coming up and popping up into existence, okay? That's what it is. It's basically society with a complete lack of kshatriyas, and those who are kshatriya inclined are basically hunted down by these owl claws, basically by the Shudras who are assigned to do the dirty work of the corrupt Vaishyas and corrupt Brahmanas. Basically, so you have the corrupt policemen, corrupt military. All these corrupt individuals are assigned to hunt down and go after the actual would-be kshatriyas, basically. So you basically have to live Rambo style as a kshatriya in this age, or as a kshatriya inclined, Brahmana who teaches kshatriyas. You have to live that way because you're basically going to get hunted down otherwise. I got shot in the back with a taser myself, and I've had guns pointed at my head and stuff like that. So yeah, it's a very serious thing. Kshatriyas are not wanted by Kali. He doesn't like us, and he does not like anyone who understands how Varnashrama works or who's able to reestablish it. So this is why Harinama Sankirtana is the only way to actually establish Varnashrama Dharma, because this way we're united together, and we actually are united in a solid front together. Otherwise, Kali is going to maintain his influence, and the Kshatriyas won't be able to rise up. The temples will continue being run by corrupt Vaishyas under his intentional, purposeful thing, and the Brahmanas will cater to these businessmen who are running the temples, okay, which is what Kali wants. And also the Shudra inclined will just go along with what the corrupt Vaishyas and the corrupt Brahmanas agree to. And the corrupt Brahmanas are associated with a big fat stomach because basically they're just satisfied getting fed, living at temples, basically just getting all the food that they need, and being able to just chill around and meditate lazily and stuff, and not engage in the Yuga Dharma. That's what Kali wants. He wants the corrupt Vaishyas to run temples and be managerial positions, and they're the ones who usually end up getting these positions for that reason, instead of Kshatriyas. And then he wants the Shudra inclined to follow them, go along with it, which they do. They're the ones that are misled. And then he wants the Kshatriyas completely out of the picture altogether, right? And so that's what's happening. You have corrupt Brahmanas, corrupt Vaishyas, and corrupt Shudras, basically infiltrating every facet of the movement. And in most cases, they're innocent. They're not even knowing that Kali is actually shoving them into these positions and diluting their minds from the importance of Varnashrama Dharma and Harinama Sankirtana together, okay? So, Nitai Gordas, you said, can you walk us through japa after Harinama? Yes, this is very important. So after we engage in Harinama Sankirtana, the engagement of Japamala is we've united other living beings intimately with Radha and Krishna, which is what we're doing in Harinama Sankirtana. Then we shift into our own intimate one-on-one relationship with Radha and Krishna, meditating on that. Now, meditating on that, you specifically will have realizations about this after Harinama Sankirtana more so, because now you'll actually understand how you interact with other living beings in Goloka, okay? How you feel towards them and how they feel towards you, okay? So that will help you more clarify more what your Svarupa is, relationship to Radha and Krishna and living beings. And Radha and Krishna will now be more inspired to especially give you intimate reciprocation, which is the whole purpose of Japamala, all right? So when you're chanting Japamala, when you're meditating on the forms of Radha and Krishna, you'll be meditating naturally on how you're most attracted to them, okay? And you'll come to ever deeper realizations about how you're attracted and why you're attracted to them in those ways. And that will be how you're spontaneously inspired to serve them internally, in your heart and mind, and eternally, okay? And this will happen when you engage in Harinama Sankirtana as much as possible. Then you'll see who you are, what your Svarupa is, and all these things will start to be very much clarified to you, okay? So in my own case, the meditations will continue to refine also over and over and over again. So, so it's very important though, not to engage in only Japamala separately and not Harinama Sankirtana, because you won't get the same result and you won't get the same depth of result either. You'll basically just, because what will happen is you might get some realizations, but if you're not engaging in Harinama, those realizations will, Harinama Sankirtan, those realizations will then be mixed with imaginative thoughts and mental speculations to various degrees. Even though Radha and Krishna will reciprocate with you, on your end, because you haven't been engaging in Harinama Sankirtana, giving love to others, you'll be more absorbed on your own, using Radha and Krishna for your own gratification, so sucking in their love for your own gratification more than giving that love to others. Okay, that's what will happen if you only do Japamala without Harinama. Okay, and you can easily observe this in your own life. Like, you'll notice that your enthusiasm to chant Japamala will be mechanical and it'll be forced if you're not engaging in Harinama Sankirtana. It'll be mostly mechanical and mostly forced. And the reason for that is you're not engaging in your eternal function, and therefore, because you're not engaging in your eternal function, you can't have enthusiasm to engage in the secondary subsidiary factor of your eternal function. So it's like you can't get the reward for running a marathon if you haven't actually run the marathon. You know, it's basically like trying to steal the trophy, and even if you do steal the trophy, you haven't actually earned the trophy. You see what I'm saying? So intimate reciprocation is causeless from Radha and Krishna, but it's, in terms of our end, we experience that as actually a reward for engaging in our eternal function, okay, as a living being. So it's not that Radha and Krishna just, they reciprocate, yes, but we won't be able to pick up on their reciprocation, because if we're not engaging in our eternal function, we're going to be immersed in using Radha and Krishna in Goloka for our own gratification, which is what the material world is, all right? It's a distortion of that intimate interaction with them, okay? So therefore, so that we don't experience the distortion, but we experience the real thing, the real version, we have to run the marathon, which is Harinama Sankirtana, and to get the goal at the end of the marathon, okay? Now, the reward will happen just for running the marathon itself, even if you don't win the marathon, because it's not a competition of who wins or who doesn't. It's about actually running. That's what it's about, okay? Which is singing and dancing and ecstasy, okay? That's our marathon. It's singing and dancing and ecstasy, and that's the victory. That's where the reward comes, okay? So watch this happen. You'll notice your enthusiasm for Japamala will skyrocket, okay? And even if you don't engage in Japamala, if all you do is Harinama Sankirtana, you're still better off. Even if you miss Japamala, you're still better off just doing the Harinama Sankirtana alone, even without Japamala. If you have to do one or the other, do Harinama Sankirtana. That's the better choice. That's the better way to go. But naturally, you will be inclined to do more Japamala for sure from Harinama, for sure, hands down. And you'll come to deeper realizations as well about who you are, what your relationship, because this is what it's about. Self-realization isn't just realizing you're an eternal servant of Krishna. It's about realizing who you are as an eternal servant of Krishna, like who your Svarupa is. Otherwise, there's no meaning to self-realization. It's still just impersonalism in that case. Basically, even if you have the personal understanding, if it's just a vague, I'm the self, I'm beyond the body, I have a relationship with Krishna, but you don't know what that is, that's still not actually very personal, because it's just a vague theoretical concept, basically. Okay, I am an eternal soul, but I have no idea who I am. I just vaguely understand that I'm the servant of Krishna, and that's not self-realization. That's theoretical conceptualization. Okay? Theoretical conceptualization has nothing to do with direct self-realization. Self-realization is realizing what your form is, who you are, what your pastimes are with Krishna and Goloka. And you can only come to that realization by Harinama Sankirtana. You don't realize that through Japamala in Kaliyuga by itself. You come to, you realize that from Harinama Sankirtana, then Japamala gives you realizations. Okay? So, and that Harinama Sankirtana could be either actually singing and dancing all the time or writing books encouraging people to do that. Okay? Which is what Prabhupada and Bhaktisiddhanta did. So one or the other or both together are equally Harinama Sankirtana, if that's what you're doing all day. Okay? And yeah, so I hope that makes sense. And Gabriel says, yeah, the feeling of cooled down will arise, be awakened. A spiritual energy starts to generate called heat, and then you'll actually naturally desire / be moved to japa and other holy activity. Bingo. That's exactly how it works. Yep. You know, there's been days that I've missed myself, Japamala, and all these other things. But I've noticed, though, even the days that I've missed that, I've still felt better and more spiritually surcharged just from only doing Harinama Sankirtana alone. Whereas there's been other days where I've chanted Japamala almost the entire day, right? And yes, I felt enlivened for sure, but it wasn't the same sensation of enlivenment though. And I covered that in a previous video too. You'll notice there's a slightly different sensation from Harinama Sankirtana and one-on-one intimate reciprocation from Radha and Krishna. They're both equally wonderful and uplifting, but you'll notice that the Harinama Sankirtana, it's like a double whammy. It's like you're getting the intimate reciprocation combined with reciprocation from other living beings also. So you can kind of look at it like this. The Japamala is very much so the one-on-one reciprocation from Radha and Krishna, okay? You with them, basically, in private, more or less. And then the Harinama Sankirtana is you getting love and affection from them in that private intimacy combined with being with them in public in the open with other living entities giving you love and affection too, okay? So it's like a double whammy. Basically, Harinama Sankirtana is like double, triple, quadruple, and then Japamala is like your individualized one-on-one reciprocations. You see what I'm saying? So that's why the distinction is so important here to understand, you know, because the intimate one-on-one stuff is important, but the group together stuff is more important than the individual intimate stuff. More important. You see what I'm saying? More significant is the point, basically, and actually more pleasing to Radha and Krishna both. Even though they are pleased by direct intimate reciprocation, they're even more pleased by causelessly giving to others. You see, that's basically it's us going above and beyond, which is actually the standard of our eternal existence. Us going above and beyond is what we eternally do, each of us. Okay, and that's what Radha and Krishna eternally do also. So yeah, so we've covered Kali in brief and how he runs this stuff, and I'm going to especially go further in depth next week. I'll cover it a little bit here on how Kali, because my issue has been the porn addiction, but how Kali specifically is using pornography addiction amongst devotees, and how and in what way he's using this to alter how we see our relationship with Radha and Krishna and influence how we perceive our entire devotional life and reality around us, basically. And how he's also doing this with the whole rest of the world materialistically as well, and what's actually going on here, okay? And what he's actually doing is he's promoting worship of himself directly, and he's passing it off as all these other different things. But it's actually, he's promoting direct worship of his personal self, Kali, through all these different mediums, okay? Pornography is the biggest one he's passing it off through, and he's doing it through all these other streams as well. I'm very familiar with the pornography side, though, of what he's doing, because that's been my issue, and I've gotten a lot of really in-depth insight into that whole industry, people involved, the occult stuff, what's really taking place, and what Kali's agenda is for that, okay, in terms of this next phase of the world he's wanting to bring in, okay, under his worship and rule, all right? And this is correlating with the synthetic sex doll technology, the robotic tech, which is super hyper-realistic and stuff, which Radha and Krishna intends to be used in their service in Lord Chaitanya to make dioramas, very detailed dioramas, deity forms and things like that. Whereas the materialistic world, they're going to be using these things to create basically just robotic prostitutes of infinite every description you could think of and imagine, okay? So that people engage in worshiping Kali's genitals, his personality, and his sexual indulgence, basically. That is what's really happening with this, all right? Make no mistake about it. So everything, you'll notice in pornography, everything that Kali is promoting has directly to do with worshiping his form, okay? But he's basically just passing it off as something else, more or less. But he's actually he's subconsciously trying to get us to worship him directly. That's all he's doing, actually. So when you see his game, and you can see how he adversely affects your consciousness in so many ways, and he affects everybody's consciousness involved, not just a few individuals here and there, but everybody. So that's the key. It's going to be used for Krishna, right? So what's going to end up happening is there's going to be a huge debate amongst devotees. I'm going to be one of the individuals at the forefront of using this tech, these very beautiful, detailed forms to make deities of Radha and Krishna and Lord Chaitanya and their associates with this synthetic tech. Whereas there's going to be a lot of devotees, at least to begin with, probably very much opposed to it. Because they're going to think it's, it's just lustful, it's this or that, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, no, I'm going to use this because Radha and Krishna have planned, and Lord Chaitanya has planned, that they themselves will be manifesting in as close as possible forms that they originally look like. Like, okay, yes, everyone who is a devotee can understand that Radha and Krishna in their deity forms, whatever, however they appear, are Radha and Krishna, and we appreciate their beauty that way as devotees. But what Radha and Krishna actually look like in terms of their actual features and form and stuff is insanely attractive, even to the materialists of this world. Okay, so this technology is going to be the only form of tech to actually fully manifest that visually to the whole world, to actually see the proportions of Radha and Krishna's forms real time, to where everybody's attraction is going to skyrocket towards Radha and Krishna, because they're going to visually be able to see with virtual reality technology and synthetic technology, which can be properly used in their service, yes, to make deities, because it's still just a transformation of Earth, okay, is where basically they're going to see the detailed forms of Radha and Krishna so much so that they're actually going to see what we've been talking about now all these years. Because right now it's just basically like a lot of people, they get the concept that Radha and Krishna are infinitely beautiful, but they don't actually have the visual in front of them. Holy crap, they're actually insanely attractive. That's how beautiful they are. Wow, why didn't I take to this movement before? Why didn't I take to this process? Okay, this is what's going to start happening. All right, so it's going to be really trippy, and I've been praying to them a lot about this to manifest their forms in this world. Now, thankfully, part of my assigned mission, and why I go by that name, Kamadeva Dasa, is because I've always been obsessed with form. I've been obsessed with the female form and all the details thereof since I was a kid, okay? So art, I do a lot of artwork and stuff in this regard, so many other things, and naturally I've been lustful also. But the thing is, I can use this in Radha and Krishna's service, okay? And I've been able to finally tell and figure out how you can actually tell. There's a way to get Radha and Krishna through their mercy to manifest in a murti form on a picture versus just drawing a picture and having it associated with them. You actually engage in prayer, you engage in all these other different things, and they will actually manifest in murti forms and in deity forms for you out of love and affection if your consciousness is a certain consciousness in the requesting of them to manifest in this way versus just drawing a picture and having it a picture that, you know, you rubber stamp as being Radha and Krishna's deities. Here's the thing, yeah, they're incredibly attractive, and the reciprocations that I have with them so far are especially what has kept me enthusiastic in devotional service, because they've allowed me to see their forms, at least some glimpses of their forms to one degree or another, even if they were mixed with imaginary ideas or whatever, and their forms are insanely more beautiful than any female you'd ever see in this world. Krishna's form himself is actually more beautiful in terms of body structure, facial features than any female also. This is very important to understand. All right, so naturally, they've been helping me overcome my material lust by encouraging me in this direction to actually use this as much as possible in their service, because their forms are what's the most important, actually, eternally and transcendentally, because everything is super personal, is about the forms of Radha and Krishna. More so than the sound vibration, more so than everything else, their forms are what's the most important, okay? Which means their facial features, their arm and body structure, their leg structure, everything else, that is actually the most important thing of all, period, in transcendent reality, in the absolute truth, and everything else. So all these people have been claiming that the sound vibration stuff is the basis of the forms of Radha and Krishna. No, they're a bunch of syncretic Brahma bodies. They're bogus. They're going to be exposed. And they're going to be exposed by Radha and Krishna manifesting their forms, this technology. Okay? So what's going to happen, naturally, is a lot of people, because they're going to see how beautiful Radha and Krishna are, there's going to be a lot of pornographic, conceptual, speculative stuff created around them, right? And I'm going to get blamed for a lot of this, basically. Not that I'm going to directly create that, but that people are going to blame me for basically being involved in this, and they're going to associate me with other people creating all this type of stuff. Well, the fact of the matter is, the lustful material world is going to be attracted to Radha and Krishna naturally, so naturally that's what they're going to do with these visuals and stuff, right? We're going to preach against the misuse of these visuals, but still, people are naturally going to do it. We can't control what other people do, right? But the point is, their beauty must be manifest. So, for devotees to feel fully enthusiastic in Harinama Sankirtana, they have to internally see Radha and Krishna, okay? And you'll see them by engaging in the process, okay, of Harinama. And when you see them internally, it'll be extremely vividly clear why you're engaging in Harinama Sankirtana, and the depth of their beauty also, okay? Extremely clear, right? So, yeah. I'm looking forward to these days ahead. It's going to be really trippy, actually, because yeah, we're going to have Harinama Sankirtana everywhere, but then we're also going to be surrounded by this tech, you know, the VRA tech and the synthetics tech and stuff. And it's going to get to a point where these sex dolls are going to be as cheap and easily available as cell phones, basically. So it's going to be really essential for devotees to be able to distinguish temporal lust from transcendental pure love more so than ever before. Okay, because you're going to have these forms all over the place, easily accessible to you in VRA and in synthetic sex doll forms. They can just basically cater to any customization you want, more or less. And devotees will have easy access to these things. So it's going to make it even harder for sannyasis than it has been up to this point. So what I'm going to do, when the robotic tech comes in, I'm going to start programming all these extremely beautiful female forms in the forms of the descriptions of the gopis of Goloka Vrindavana in the scriptures, Krishna's associates, Radha, Krishna, Rukmini Devi, Rohini Devi, and stuff like this, and programming them to continually chant the Mahamantra, basically. So, in other words, even if we are not chanting the Mahamantra directly, they will be continuously chanting the Mahamantra, and even these robotic mechanical machines will actually be manifestations of Radha Krishna in this world, reminding us of them constantly, okay? But it's going to kind of be funny to a lot of people, but I'm serious. Like, I'm going to be doing this as much as I possibly can and encouraging people to do this as well. Program all of these things to constantly chant the Mahamantra all day, okay? And that's going to be very good for the whole world because it's going to make it a lot easier because if robotics it's constantly doing this, they're not going to get fatigued or tired. They're just going to keep chanting, right? So, and then you said, if any Sangha wants to talk about any of us too, please PM me. This is huge info, basically what we'll be going through 2020 plus. Yep, exactly. Right. And we're actually going to be talking about this a lot more in the discussions to come in the next weeks ahead and stuff. Yeah, this is going to be big. So feel free, Gabriel, to join us. We got a group started up called the International Harinama Sankirtana Movement, which is actually Chaitanya's movement. Yeah, wonderful, Mark. Thanks for tuning in. Glad to have you with us, man. Have a good one. Okay. Yeah, I'm glad I finally got it on YouTube. It's going to be helpful. You can watch it anytime. So yeah, next week I'm going to actually cover Radha's encoded messages regarding the flat Earth and how that correlates with her appearance, or I should say how that correlates with her. But yeah, both her appearance in the synthetic tech, correlating with her actual glories being spread in the world, correlating with Harinama Sankirtana and the flat Earth map all being revealed. So what's going to happen is the flat Earth map's going to be revealed. The full flat Earth map based on the Vedas. Once this happens, the whole world's going to start reading the Vedas, and now they're going to all start asking about Radha and Krishna because they're going to want to know more. Okay, what is this Mahamantra? What is this Radha? Because you guys have known about the flat Earth the whole time, and you've also known about this. So it's like, well, you guys were right about the flat Earth. You were right about everything else scientifically and stuff. So what else are you right about? And then that'll lead us to asking us about Radha and Krishna. They'll get the full information about Radharani and Krishna as much as possible as we have. And about their Svarupa, all these detailed things about Harinama Sankirtana, so on and so forth. It's going to spread the movement further, and Radha and Krishna's actual forms, in as close to detail as possible, manifested in this world, are going to manifest in deity forms. Okay, incredibly beautiful deity forms. My gosh, like just incredible. So yeah, so that's what's going to play out, and so I'm going to cover her encoded message. I covered her encoded message in Open Your Heart a couple weeks back. There's a lot to it, but this next one I'm going to cover, it's a song called Heaven on Earth by Belinda Carlisle, which was encoded underneath the scenes by Radharani without the knowledge of Belinda Carlisle or the musicians, just like she has encoded the other one with Madonna and stuff like that. The message is very specific though, and the date of this encoding correlates with this year, September 16th, 17th, and 18th of this year, and it also correlates with 2016, 2017, and 2018, these 3 years also, okay? And that happens to be the exact appearance day of Shri Radha this year, whereas back in 1987, her appearance day was on the 1st of September, a different day. But she encoded this back in 1987 to give us the heads up about what's going to be happening this year in 2018. Okay? And 2018, 2 has to do with Radha and Krishna united together. 0 is representative of Radharani in her completeness, her all-accommodatingness. 0 doesn't represent nothingness. That's a common misconception. And I covered this in a previous video. 1 is Krishna now on the actual other side of Radharani, where normally there, when we look at the altar, Krishna's over here, Radha's there. So 2018, actually, even the year itself that we're looking at, is correlating with Radha Krishna together. Radharani emphasized as the forefront, Krishna next to her, and then the 8 Ashtasakis. Okay, that's why she chose 2018 to reveal a lot of this stuff later on this year. All right, so I'm going to cover that video first. Then after that, I'll cover the Kaliyuga stuff, more about the symbols he uses, how he runs this world, the six-pointed star, how that's the perverted reflection of the star of Goloka, why it's used as the cult of Saturn. We're going to cover pornography stuff, what's being promoted in that, how it's the worship of Kali himself, why he's promoting it in this way, why he's promoting the synthetic sex doll tech, how the AI is actually going to be associated with the Antichrist, and with bringing the whole world to syncretic Brahmavadi philosophy. So many things. So the Antichrist is this, it's a subconscious perception we have about a relationship with Radha and Krishna. That's the real actual Antichrist. And that's manifested in various ways. One of the ways that he's going to manifest, he or she's going to manifest, is in a hyper-intelligent AI, basically, that's going to end up being able to debate and philosophically defeat every single other belief system in the world. We'll be the only ones left standing, though. The Krishna devotees will be the only ones left standing, able to defeat this stuff philosophically in debate, and point by point we'll be able to defeat the intellectual capacity of this AI. Okay? Nobody else will be able to defeat it. And this AI will actually prove to all other so-called monotheistic religions that their beliefs actually are what the AI already has calculated and understood on a deeper level than them. In other words, they're going to basically be shown how their beliefs have been the entire time syncretic Brahmavadi. And they're going to try to pull this with us, the devotees, as well. But we're going to be the only ones left standing, because we're going to be the only ones able to refute the syncretic Brahmavadi philosophy, because we're the only ones that have this information about Radha and Krishna's forms. Nobody else has it. Okay? So it's going to be interesting, because once this AI is defeated, okay, some really trippy things are going to take place in the world. Now, whether it's one singleized debate that the whole world sees, or whether it's like a series of different things where our belief is found to actually be able to be resistant to this one world religion stuff that's coming in where nobody else is, that's going to basically make us seen as the enemies of the world, number one, but at the same time it's going to generate a huge number of allies as well against this thing. Okay? And then and it's going to alarm actually the ones behind this Antichrist movement, this beast stuff and everything else, because they're going to see that they actually aren't able to conquer everyone, specifically the Krishna devotees philosophically, but they're able to conquer everybody else. Okay? They're going to notice this very clearly. Mostly right now, everybody's already been conquered. Okay? Pretty much every single other belief in the world is already a syncretic Brahmavadi viewpoint on a subconscious level already. So there's no need for people to actually change their views at all for this thing to win against them. This is the whole point. And this is how it has won so far, and it will win against every other belief aside from super-personal Krishna consciousness and Harinama Sankirtana. Okay? So we're going to be able to prove where intellect stops. We're going to be able to show this to the world where programming stops, where the processing of information stops, and where the understanding of form beyond the processing of information kicks in. Okay? So we're going to be able to prove to the world how the soul is eternal and how the soul is actually superior to programming or AI or intellect. We're going to actually be able to prove this in debates with these AI systems. Okay? We're going to be able to solidly prove it. And the whole world's going to see it. And this is going to amaze people. It's basically going to do two things. It's going to show people that, okay, AI actually does have a limit. It stops there. It's not a god. AI is not a god. It's actually, and it cannot be made into a god either. And it's also going to show them that what the soul is able to see, and specifically who the soul is able to see beyond intellectual capacity. And so basically it's going to throw this Gnosticism garbage in the water, or I should say misused Gnosticism, that directs people away from the forms of Radha and Krishna and stuff, or sidelines their forms. And it's going to expose all these beliefs as being bogus, is what it's going to do. Okay? So people will naturally lose faith in the AI in terms of what it's capable of doing, and that's going to ignite a lot of tyrannical fury amongst these AI things and amongst the people who program them, okay, against us, basically. We'll win. We'll come out on top for sure. But it's going to come, with some resistance from the other side, too. So be ready, be prepared. Know what you're doing, know what the Krishna consciousness is, know what the truth about Radha and Krishna is, and know how to defeat anyone and everything that may come up against you philosophically. Okay? Because they will come up against you, and you have to know how to crush them. So, all right. So it's 2:08. We went over 2 hours. Thank you all for taking part in this. We covered a huge amount of material in this video, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. In the meantime, Hare Krishna and Hare Bol.